It's a tale as old as time. A married couple struggling to keep up the excitement as the years pass. And after having a child, the need to spice things up gets even more pressing. For some couples, this can mean things like trying out new positions, a little bit of role-playing, some toys. This was not the case for one 28-year-old Redditor, who very quickly found himself well beyond his comfort zone. For this episode of Tales from the Internet, let's talk about a couple who had their marriage ruined by turds. It's getting cold outside, and winter is the perfect time to cozy up with a mobile game. The one I'm about to tell you about is available on both your mobile devices and PC. You can keep your progress between these devices as you collect over 800 champions. Lizardmen, elves, orcs, demons, you name it. Let me tell you about some of these champions. You got the HP-based champion Sir Nicholas. He's one of the best champions in the game. He's top tier for most areas. Particularly, he's good for an unkillable team against the Demon Lord clan boss. His skills are based around keeping your team alive longer so your other champions can focus on doing damage. And a great hero for doing damage is Georgid the Breaker. This month, get involved in Raid's Christmas Story, a special holiday-themed event where you can follow Sir Nicholas through a festive story. You can win epic and legendary champions and even Amazon gift cards. Head to www.raidxmas.plarium.com. The Cursed City is one of Raid's biggest features since the Doom Tower, with 100 stages to complete, including stages where you'll need to take down 2 of Raid's bosses at the same time. As you work your way through the Cursed City, complete its various quests, and you can even get your hands on a mythical champion. If you haven't started playing yet, what are you waiting for? Click the link in my description or scan the QR code to get insane bonuses. You'll get 2 epic champions. First is Lightsworn, a very strong epic champion from the Sacred Order. His kit allows you to keep a team alive with an increased defense buff and a revive on death skill. The second is Epic Juliana after reaching level 12, an epic champion and a boss killer from the Sacred Order. She's an attack-type warrior wielding the magic affinity, thus very powerful against enemies with affinity. Once you're in and crushing your enemies, find me under the name Wang. Join my clan, Titty Gang. We'll be legends together. Don't forget to use my Raid Shadow Legends link in the description or scan the QR code. You'll get insane bonuses for new players with awesome champions. Normally, when a relationship hits a speed bump, you might want to reach out to friends and family for a little bit of advice. Even if you generally have things put together pretty well, sometimes it just helps to have an outside perspective. But of course, there's some things that you might not want friends and family to be privy to, in which case, Reddit's r/relationship advice might be what you need. Thus, on Friday, November 23rd of 2018, a user named Throwaway Husband account makes the post, "Wife told me she wanted to experiment. I obliged, then she attempted to eat my feces." He begins by saying that he's using a throwaway account because his wife follows his real Reddit account. Which, I mean, something tells me that this situation isn't so common that she would see this and be like, oh, must be some other guy. Especially considering the great amount of detail he winds up going into. He explains that he's been married to his wife for 3 years, and the whole time they've been having pretty vanilla sex. And after they had a kid, things really slowed down. So after having the kid, the wife starts hanging out with this group of moms from the neighborhood. And she expresses these same concerns to her friends. One of the moms pipes up and tells her the secret that saved her marriage. Pegging her husband. Which, pegging, of course, if you don't know what that is, for some reason I feel like a good chunk of the people who watch this channel for some reason might know what it is. I don't know. But for those of you who don't, it's the act of the woman straps on a makeshift a makeshift wiener. Personally, I never got the appeal of it. I mean, it's not like this thing has nerve endings for the woman to feel good with it. It's just, I guess it's some kind of a power dynamic thing. But it worked for her friend, so she wants to try it. OP, of course, was hesitant to try it. He'd said he'd never done ass play of any kind. And as he puts it, he's always thought of the anus as solely an exit. But you know, he wants to make his wife happy, so he goes along with it. And surprisingly, it actually works out okay. That next weekend, she pegged me and everything was surprisingly enjoyable. Additionally, the week following the pegging was one of the best weeks we've had together since the birth of our child. We were back to our old sex life, doing things like having sex before work and even waking each other up with head. But then the week after, she wants to peg him again. It seems like he was surprised that this wasn't just a one-time thing, which I mean, come on man, she's gotta replenish her pegging meter. Well, he agrees to it, and this time, things get a little bit more intense. This is when things took an extreme turn. During the second pegging, while my wife was inside of me, She grabbed my hair. I know that there's no indication whether she does, the old hair twist, which you kind of got to do for optimal control. She grabbed my hair, craned my neck to the right, and pressed our foreheads together. I had never seen her take control like this and thought it was very hot until she looked me in the eye and whispered, "I want your shit." I can't help but picture her saying it like the sick animation Red Diamond Dragon Club. "I'm hungry for shit." He's taken aback by this, so she elaborates. She wants him to shit on her. He pushes her off of him, asks if she's joking, and to which she starts crying. And because of this, he starts to feel bad, thinking he's king-shaming her or something. But in any case, he just wasn't down with this, and he winds up spending the night at a friend's house. Of course, he doesn't explain to the friend why he's staying there. He just needed to crash. Throughout the week that follows, the only conversations he has with his wife are about their kid. After the whole week passes, he finally confronts her about this whole situation. She told me again that she wanted me to shit on her, and that it meant a lot to her. I thought it was sickening, but she claimed this was her deepest, darkest kink. I couldn't understand how and why my shit excited her, but she insisted that she has always wanted this. It was interesting how pegging wasn't really what she wanted, but it wound up being the gateway to her admitting what it was that she really wanted. You have to wonder how many married people there are out there holding on to this kind of deep, dark secret that's only waiting for the thing that's gonna knock it loose and they finally come clean. I mean, actually, there was a comment on this post left by a Redditor who did a little bit of math. They dug into the known data and concluded that 175 hetero couples likely had engaged in coprophagia this past weekend. Poo eating, of course.
And then they eat the poo-poo.
Which, I mean, if you really think about it, though, that number, it sounds about right. In any case, OP does what any Redditor would do when presented with the prospect of shitting on his wife to make her happy. He starts looking up articles and doing research, getting his hands on all the material he possibly can about poop fetishes, looking at some scat so he can understand. And finally, he comes to the conclusion that, although it literally nauseates him, he'll try it to satisfy her. And then later that week, him and his wife are having normal sex. During the session, he mentions that he has to go take a shit, which of course makes her perk up. She gives him some words of encouragement, and although he really doesn't want to do it, he did make a promise. So they go to the bathroom. She got into the bathtub, and I hung my ass over the side of the tub. I started pushing, but unsurprisingly found it very difficult to successfully shit on my wife. I turned my head around to see my wife staring up and smiling at me, waiting for me to finish. With enough time, I was finally able to get a turd to start coming out. I could hear my wife breathing heavier beneath me as my asshole started opening. However, before the turd was able to drop on her chest, I felt a sensation around my asshole. I turned around and saw my wife, the love of my life, the mother of my son, attempting to catch my turd in her mouth as it fell out of my asshole. I was horrified that she would try to do this, and tried to put the shit back into my body so she couldn't receive it in her mouth. Seeing what looked like an attempt by her to eat my shit brought me close to throwing up. So he clenches and tries to keep it from coming out, but in doing that, he winds up cutting a little piece off, and he hears it drop somewhere below him, and he doesn't even look, he just runs out with seeing whatever it is that his wife did with it. He locks himself in their other bathroom and cleans himself up, the whole time thinking about how he's never gonna be able to look his wife in the face again. She's knocking on the door and he's ignoring it, and eventually she texts him, thanking him for fulfilling her wish, and asking him to come to bed. But at the time of writing it, he had not yet gone. I've been sitting in the living room typing this for the last half hour, scared to face my wife. We have plans to take our son to the zoo with another family tomorrow, but I don't think I can look at her after what she did to me. I feel deceived and violated by the woman I love and trust. During our initial conversations about this, there was never a question that my shit would go anywhere other than her chest. She knew how uncomfortable I was with this in the first place, yet she still tried to push the boundary that we had established. He concludes by asking if anyone else had experienced a similar violation of trust, and that he's concerned that this situation could end their marriage. Now, of course, you've got some people who think this whole thing's a troll post. 10 points for a unique troll post. I wish I was trolling. Which, by the way, that was the only other comment this guy ever left. I do think, though, that with the amount of attention this post got, the sort of person who writes troll posts on Reddit wouldn't be able to help themselves but make a bunch of updates. Of course, these updates never came. Granted, the mods eventually locked this thread and they added a warning that if OP wants to add updates, he needs to contact them first. So perhaps there actually were updates that he wasn't able to post. In any case, this actually does raise an interesting point. On some level, this is a violation of consent. Like, he was clearly uncomfortable with this act to begin with, and then she went and tried to make it something that he had never agreed to. One user, Indelible Moments, directed him to r/BDSM community for advice from more experienced people in this matter. Although another user, Dinos Are Gay Like Me, noted that even there's not a lot of scat people. Although another user, Moy Fry, brought up a good point. Even then, the core aspects of a scene are the core aspects. She violated his trust and took the scene to a level he wasn't ready for. Having the language to talk to her could be what helps repair their relationship. Perhaps my favorite take in the comments, though, the most Reddit-brained thing that I've read in this entire discussion. This is so fucked. I just don't think I could literally shit in someone's mouth and then ever kiss them again. If you ever had a dog, just consider that a lot of dogs eat their own shit then later proceed to lick your face. Yeah, but hopefully your dog is not the mother of your children and you need to regain a sense of sexual normalcy with said dog. Hopefully. This thread is weird enough already. That's a story of the Redditor whose wife greedily stole his poo. There is a question that the greatest minds of our civilization have contended with for time immemorial, or at least since the 80s or so. That question is, what if you had a video game with boobs in it? Many have tried. You've got infamous Atari games like Bachelor Party, Custer's Revenge, and my personal favorite, just for the amazing title, Beat 'em and Eat 'em. I can only imagine how horned up people used to get to these barely coherent blobs that imply boobs. You got those scandalous one-pixel areolas of Soap Panic. That screen in Rings of Power where if you press the right buttons, you see a naked lady. And who can forget fighting game classic Strip Fighter 2, where you can just bash your opponent's skull in using your gigantic boobs. You know, I really need to make a whole other video just on the topic of terrible adult video games. By the time we get to the polygon graphics era though, video game boobs kind of fell off, leaving fans in AOL chat rooms trying to figure out the elusive Tomb Raider nude code once and for all. It was up to developer Z-Access, with the help of publisher Acclaim, to pull us back out of the dark ages and give the people what they want, a game where you ride your bike with your boobs out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of BMX XXX. BMX XXX is a game where you look back on it and you're like, what planet could anybody, let alone a well-known video game publisher that's been around for decades, think that this was a good idea? I mean, even when it came out, people were thinking this. And yet, there's no other time in human history where such a thing could have ever come into existence. We're talking late 90s, early 2000s, they just had a very special energy to them. A pervasive cultural current that took us to a place that was very much the opposite of the way things are now. An age of blatant offensiveness and vulgarity, which gave way to a renaissance of objectifying women. You're sitting down watching WWF, the most mainstream it had ever been since Hulkamania, and then Sable just dumps him out on live TV, while Jerry Lawler is screaming for puppies. Then you switch over to Comedy Central. The Man Show's on, and between segments of Girls on Trampolines and Jimmy Kimmel in blackface, you get Girls Gone Wild ads where Doug Stanhope is yelling at drunk college girls to show us where babies feed. I think like at least half the cars I'd see around New York at this time would have those Opie and Anthony Whip 'em Out Wednesday stickers on the window. And then, while all this is going on, you've also got the rise of extreme sports. Stuff like skateboarding is transitioning from being perceived as something for misbehaved children like Bart Simpson to a legitimate sport that could be judged and ranked. And perhaps the single biggest moment in the mainstreaming of extreme sports comes on June 27th, 1999 at the 5th X Games. This was the day that Tony Hawk hit the first recorded 900 on a vert ramp with a successful landing. This gets all kinds of mainstream coverage, and grainy real player videos of it are all over the internet. And Tony Hawk is propelled into essentially being the first legitimate mainstream extreme sports star, which makes him the perfect face of the skateboarding game being developed by Neversoft, which of course would become Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I remember it so vividly. My friend gets the game, so I grab a can of Surge, throw on my Jenko Kangaroos, and head over to experience what would be a world-changing game. I mean, sure, there had been other extreme sports games before. PlayStation even came with a demo that included ESPN's X Games, but there was just nothing like this before. It was simple enough that you could just pick it up and go, but at the same time, it was complex enough where you just keep on getting better and better and challenge yourself more and more for hours, days. Just absolutely endless replay value. I don't think I need to tell you this would be one of the most beloved games of all time. And of course, it made money hand over fist, which inspires a wave of similar extreme sports games. And that right there is the seed that would eventually grow into BMX XXX. 2 months after Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is released, Rockstar Games releases Thrasher Presents Skate and Destroy, developed by Z-Axis. This game was a lot more realistic, more simulation-like than Tony Hawk. Your characters and your boards would take damage, and you had to do more involved, realistic movements to perform the tricks. Some people thought this made the game too difficult and a bit tedious, but there are people who prefer this type of skateboarding game, and you would see more of this formula in games like Skate. But it would just not be anywhere near as successful as Tony Hawk. Things were just getting started though. At this time, Sean Rosen, an executive producer for Acclaim, was looking for a company to develop a BMX game. Eventually, he would wind up approaching Z-Axis, and what they would do is they would take the stages they already made for Thrasher, and they just made a bike to put into Thrasher stages with a character on and see if it worked. According to an interview advice, they did it in like a day and sent the build back to me. I presented it to executives at Acclaim and they loved it, Rosen said. After they had their prototype, they would approach some BMX pros to be the face of the games. They began to work with Ryan Nyquist and of course the late Dave Mira. They both loved the concept and Dave would become extremely involved in the production of the game. He would put together the move lists, do the motion capture, get the sponsors, and he brought in other BMX pros to be in the game that would of course eventually bear his name, Dave Mira Freestyle BMX. Although of course this wasn't as popular as Tony Hawk, it was much more successful from Thrasher and a very well-received game, leading to the release of a second version of Freestyle BMX with extra content, and of course, Dave Mira Freestyle BMX 2. The games are doing well, definitely well enough that Acclaim already announces Dave Mira 3, but it's clear that by now this genre is becoming very, very saturated. Dave Mira 3 was going to have to do something to stand out. And the developers, Z-Axis, had a few ideas. They wanted to add a bit of a story to it, they wanted to add some quests and things like that. It's described in the Vice interview. I'm pretty sure that it was kind of laid out, the player was a part of a BMX team on tour, and we were just stopping along our tour route throughout the states. You know, a lot like the skate videos you've seen for decades now, where they just get in their beat up car, drive, stop at some abandoned amusement park, and go skate. And the people who worked at Z-Axis were all really excited to work on this concept. Not only were they pushing their boundaries of what they could do in a game, but it was a really fresh idea. Mind you, Tony Hawk's Underground was still a few years away, but to Acclaim, this wasn't enough. They needed a little something to create some buzz around the game, so they start brainstorming. You know, when you get a whole bunch of guys in a room, people start throwing out stupid ideas, he told me. What does mature mean? Maybe we'll have some more hardcore music. Maybe there'll be a little bit more language in it. And someone threw out, I don't remember who it was, let's put strippers in the game, and everyone laughed. But after the laughter dies out, people start to talk about this seriously. What if you had strippers in the game? At the time, Acclaim was struggling financially, so they were really desperate to try just about anything to make some money. They wanted to get people talking, and strippers in a bike game would get people talking. And there you go, now we're actually making a BMX game with strippers in it. Sean Rosen goes and strikes a deal with the Scores Strip Club, which is probably best known for being a strip club in New York that Howard Stern liked. And they're gonna have some of the girls appear in the game in real unlockable strip videos, set to songs like Click Click Boom and Down by 311. Like, you cannot hammer in more how much this game is a product of its time. It all sounds so absurd, and yet you look at videos of it on YouTube and people seem to have fond memories. My first porno. Sigh. So many memories. Also inspired me to grow up and date strippers. This is why I am obsessed with Asian women, and will always be. What a blessed child I was when I was 12 years old. Of course, though, they had to get Dave Mira on board with this idea. So Sean Rosen flies out to meet with Dave and tell him about the new concept for Dave Mira 3. And surprisingly, Dave Mira loves this idea. Sean describes him as literally rolling on the floor laughing. It's the funniest thing he ever heard of. And thus, the already announced Dave Mira Freestyle BMX 3 becomes Dave Mirra BMX XXX. And sure enough, May of that year comes around and people are getting their first looks of Dave Mirra BMX XXX, and it's creating all of the buzz that Acclaim had hoped for, with journalists commentating on the groundbreaking boob jiggle technology. The press just can't stop talking about this game. But then there's a problem. You see, Dave Mirra loved this concept. Dave Mirra sponsors, not so much. So it was decided that Dave would not appear in this game unless all of the sexual and otherwise offensive content was removed. But Acclaim so strongly believed that their BMX game with boobs was going to be the big success that they've been waiting for, that they decided they wanted complete control of this game. And thus, in August of 2002, it's announced that Dave Mirra and all of the BMX pros would be removed from the game, which is now simply titled BMX XXX. And instead, they would have Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX 3 on Game Boy Advance, which was released the same month as BMX XXX to much less controversy. So they already had to retool this game once to add strippers and side characters like the Pimp, the Wiener King, and a Chinese grocer named Long Hung Kok.
Motherfucker! What the fuck happened to my ride? No shit, they shitting on it. I ain't blind. I wanna know what we gonna be doing about it. Ah, my man! That's what I like about you, Cock. You's one smart motherfucker. My man Cock here is asking you to get all up in there and chase those diarrhea-having motherfuckers off the wire.
I can't believe they actually wrote out Axe. So now they have to go in and replace all of the real-life bikers with made-up characters. But it also gives them an opportunity to add a little something more, you know. Now if you're really good at the game, you can see their boobs. So despite this hurdle, they keep on working on the game. Acclaim starts dumping massive amounts of money into marketing for this game, because, you know, it's gonna be a big hit. They have their whole ad campaign with the Keep It Dirty and the This Is BMX, and they even have a contest on their website where one lucky woman will be crowned Miss BMX XXX. This is just the most representative collection of women from 2002 I've ever seen. I'm not sure which of these ladies won, but whoever did, they were treated to a trip to the actual Score strip club, accompanied by none other than Baba Booey and Casey Armstrong. And then another unforeseen wrench gets thrown into the works. In October, a mere month before the game's release, Toys R Us, Walmart, and KB Toys announced that they will not be carrying the game, which back then is a big deal. You had something like 25% of people who got all of their games from Walmart. And in some parts of the country, these places were pretty much the only place you could buy a game. When that happens, Acclaim responds with a point that's actually pretty valid. We believe that there is a general unfair characterization of the interactive entertainment industry, and as a result, our product is being held to an entirely different standard than other entertainment media with comparable content, including movies, television, and radio, said Greg Fishbach, the CEO of Acclaim. While we acknowledge that we are setting new benchmarks with BMX XXX, we are disappointed there are groups who fail to see how this humorous product is truly on par with such widely accepted mainstream entertainment experiences, including movies like American Pie, TV shows like The Sopranos and Sex and the City. As a leading publisher, we fully believe that consumers should have a right to choose their entertainment, and with that right comes the importance of responsible consumerism. This product was not designed for, nor is it being marketed to consumers under the age of 17. Of course, as valid as it is for the CEO to point out this hypocrisy, it changes nothing, and it also gets banned in Australia pending the removal of the adult content. And also, Sony wants it censored. Although weirdly, Nintendo of all companies was okay with it being uncensored on the GameCube. In any case, it's clear this ship is sinking. People involved are using fake names in the credits lest this game tarnish their entire career. And of course, it releases to absolute critical and commercial failure. A few months later, Dave Mirra would sue Acclaim for $20 million, alleging that this game damaged his reputation. He claimed that BMX XXX was pitched to him as more of a spoof movie like Airplane or something, but all his sexual stuff got added after he'd already signed the contract. Which does seem to contradict what Rosen said in the Vice interview, and sure enough, the lawsuit would be dropped shortly after, with Dave Mirra's contract with Acclaim continuing to 2011 as originally planned. Of course, Acclaim itself wouldn't last to 2011, filing for bankruptcy in 2004. One of the factors in this bankruptcy being the failure of BMX XXX. More specifically, the fact that they did not disclose to shareholders that they were working on a game with adult content that might get them locked out of retailers. This was brought up in a different lawsuit that was made by investors. After Acclaim went under, the Dave Mirra license would be picked up by Crave Entertainment, who would release Dave Mirra BMX Challenge, a game that actually received even worse reviews than BMX XXX. And unfortunately, the last title in the series, as in 2016, Dave would take his own life. To this day, there are some people who maintain that there is a good game buried within BMX XXX, although many more who would disagree. But the sad thing though, I can't help but think they could have avoided all of the problems that led to the downfall of this game. They could have had something here, and they could have avoided all of the problems they had with the release if they had only went half as far as they did. You know, like, as it is, it almost feels like all the content in this game, it's almost like a fake game from a movie that takes place in 2002 where they're parodying the culture of the era. But no, it's just a real thing that existed. They might have gotten somewhere if they played ball a little bit. I mean, it was ahead of its time to have this kind of story built into this kind of game. And you could have gotten away with this GTA-style humor then. It's not even that the game was too edgy, it's that the game was edgy in ways that didn't make sense. Like, did you really need a licensing deal with a specific strip club in New York that nobody really cares about? Like, the most you're gonna get out of that, if someone listened to Howard Stern, they'd be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. Like, did you really think the big scores deal was gonna sell even a single copy of this game? Oh yeah, let's have them ride their bikes with their boobs out, that'll put asses in seats. Really, they should just made the whole game about the pimp and the racist Chinese guy. Ultimately, the whole thing winds up being such a disgrace that Sean Rosen leaves the video game industry entirely, instead opening up a koi pond business. And that's the story of BMX XXX. When you look at this man, Stephen J. Sanderson, at first he gives the impression of a man who might have been typecast as a serial killer in a movie. Standing in court, wearing prison coveralls, with a weathered face and a cold look in his eyes, he explains in a calm, matter-of-fact way how and why he killed his cellmate. And these words have had millions brand him as a hero. And every time I see this clip, I'm left wondering what's this guy's whole story. Let's take a look at Stephen J. Sanderson, the inmate who killed a child abuser. Ted Dyer was convicted in early 2014 for abusing a 9-year-old. He was ordered to serve 25 to 50 years at the Saginaw Correctional Facility. It was in those first 10 months that he shared a cell with Stephen J. Sanderson. Stephen was in there for life and had no possibility of parole. The trouble began once he discovered the nature of Ted's crimes. He staged a confrontation on October 29th demanding the nonce to leave. Instead, Ted began describing the events in detail. This enraged Stephen to the point that he strangled the 67-9-year-old man to death, and his body was discovered later that day. Needless to say, there wasn't much sympathy for Ted. His death was met by cheers from the local community, celebrating the fact that there's one less monster walking the earth. Ted's victim's mother responded with a mixture of tears and laughter. Her daughter could finally feel safe. Stephen was formally charged for the attack in December. 2 months later, he pled guilty to second-degree homicide. It was a speedy process due in large part to his stunning level of transparency. While many correctly assumed his motive, they were still fascinated by the inmate's explanation. That's because the man was remarkably blunt.
Well, if it's all right, I'd like to tell you where it started.
Go ahead.
All right, well, he was my bunkie, and I had found out that he was in prison for child molestation, a really bad case. So that night he was trying to justify why he did it, and I just told him to be quiet, and he would have to leave in the morning to find a new cell. But he continued to talk about it and try to justify it, so he was a little bit bigger than me, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times, and when he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck and I took his life.
This footage made its way to YouTube where it amassed 22 million views. He became a viral sensation as people hailed him as a hero, and this intensified after the release of his interrogation in April. The first excerpt elaborates on his rationale and his thoughts in the aftermath. He shows no remorse and says Ted got what he deserved.
I mean, you know, obviously I don't think right. I'm in prison for most of my life, so my thinking isn't really rational. I don't know, I just kind of...
Thought that was the appropriate thing to do at that time?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I know murdering somebody's not a good thing, but I mean, Jesus, man, if there's the things this guy did, things he said he did, I do what's necessary. I do what some people won't. I mean, you guys are cops. You arrest people all the time for stuff that you wish you could shoot them in the face. I already know that. I'm not stupid. You know, I mean,
I understand.
There's crimes that shouldn't be committed. So, you know, I just don't have any empathy for people.
So basically, what you did, you figure Ted got what he deserved.
Ted got what he deserved. I believe that with all my heart.
The next clip has Stephen describe the actual altercation.
All right, I guess he decided to clear his conscience or something, but, you know, he told me what he was in prison for, that he had, you know, was accused of raping an 11-year-old girl, and he got 25 to life for it, and, you know, I told him that's enough, I don't want to hear anymore. I first, you know, punched him a couple times, still wouldn't shut up. Still kept telling me he wanted to explain that he didn't do it, that he was being set up and all this stuff, and I don't know, I just got mad, and then I hit him and knocked him out, and then I took the shoelaces out of his shoes, tied them together, wrapped it around his neck, and strangled him. Put him on his bed and covered him up and climbed in my bed and went to sleep.
There is a subtle discrepancy between the two accounts. The timeline here has Ted forcing the subject unprompted, and this subtle change firmly establishes Stephen as a vigilante. The narrative was set once the video reached 17 million views. There was an outpour of fan mail, primarily from women. It was an escape for them as they vented about trauma and fantasized about following in his footsteps. A lot of them expressed a romantic interest in him, and one of them even named their child after him. It got to the point where Stephen acknowledged them during his sentencing, and he took time in court to reject the label of hero.
People think I'm some kind of hero, well, I'm actually not. I just, you know, did what I thought was best in the time that I was given. I don't know, I've been getting these emails saying that, you know, it's not my position to judge anybody. And I want to make it quite clear that I didn't judge him. You know, I know God is the only judge we have. I've just set the appointment up.
Stephen was sentenced to life on April 22, 2015. In spite of this, he can be seen laughing in photos with his attorney James Gust. The lawyer explained that it made no difference. For this term to begin, his client had to die and come back to life. He then vouched for Stephen's character. The inmate had apparently threatened this scenario for months, and he promised to end any cellmate he found out abused children. But this wasn't just a warning to guards. It was also said that the deceased's family could sue for negligence. James reflected that it tells you something about him as a guy. With that said, it's still no surprise that the public continued to venerate Stephen. His confession still goes viral sporadically, with Google Trends showing a resurgence last year. Yet for every supporter he has, there is always someone out there to point out his dark past. If you recall, Stephen had a prior life sentence from 1992. The details resurfaced from an old newspaper. It began while the man was still in prison for larceny. He became pen pals with a 33-year-old named Linda McLean. Linda was struggling financially and lived alone. This fueled her to write to the cellmate of her friend's husband. The two became close and she began to overlook his record. And this was good timing as Stephen was paroled on October 16th. Afterwards, they frequently met up to drink and smoke crack. And this part is where his story starts to deviate from the authorities. It was only a week later that Linda was found suffocated in her bed. He was brought in for questioning and admitted his involvement. However, he said that this was consensual, citing the woman's depression. This claim was disputed by her friends and loved ones. Linda's mother called him a vicious convict and believed that he only said this in order to get a lesser sentence. And if that's true, it didn't turn out the way he wanted, as he wound up being charged with first-degree murder. By some accounts, he only pled guilty upon facing the death penalty, now receiving life without parole. This discovery spurred debate over whether or not he could actually be trusted. He was, after all, an eerily calm murderer. People tried to read his behavior more critically. Suddenly, his humility is coming off as a roundabout way to brag. The inconsistencies between the two tellings of the story could have been intentional, but for now the subject is up to interpretation, as understandably, a lot of people are unwilling to dismiss him entirely. That includes criminologist Joshua Long, who spent years corresponding with him. His article about the experience was published on February 7th, 2023. Josh first reached out in the summer of 2021. He was researching stories of abuse survivors that took revenge. Not expecting much, he surprisingly received a response from Stephen. At this point, Stephen felt that his time was short and he wanted to share his story. The following is a paraphrased version of that account. The instability began at a young age. Stephen was born Encol with a thin membrane around his head. This was viewed as a sign of the devil and blamed for the family falling apart. The subsequent neglect allowed him to roam the streets unsupervised. However, it also meant that there was no one looking out for his safety. In 1974, Stephen was approached by an overweight couple in an ice cream truck. They kidnapped him and locked the 10-year-old boy in their basement. He describes horrifying levels of abuse. They apparently stuck thumbtacks in his body and burned his skin with cigarettes. The pain was so unbearable that he would escape into his mind, creating a realm that he called the Dark Woods. He prepared for death every day, but it never came. And ultimately, this torture only ever ended because the man decided one day that it just wasn't necessary. The perpetrator looked him in the eyes and said it didn't matter because he was already dead inside. So he dropped Stephen off in an alley and he ran back home. And in spite of the boy's disappearance, his father offered no comfort. In fact, he actually blamed Stephen for letting it happen. This was the final straw for him, and he ran away, beginning a life of crime. Most of his adult life was spent behind bars, with a record of starting fights and stealing cars. He internalized this idea that he was empty, and his only purpose was to stop children from being hurt. With that said, it's worth noting that Josh was unable to corroborate this story. He couldn't find any evidence of this kidnapping having occurred. This could be explained by the father not reporting the incident. But also, Stephen had claimed to kill several gay men while hitchhiking. And when asked for more details about this, he refused to elaborate. To make matters worse, the article has since been deleted. It's unclear if this is related, but it could mean that Josh had found some kind of inaccuracy that he wasn't comfortable keeping published. Regardless, Stephen had clearly embraced his notoriety. Not only was he satisfied in having taken Ted's life, but if given the chance, he would do it again. He planned to attack more abusers if let out of solitary. And that was where Josh's real interest lied, finding it a sad reflection of reality. He writes, "Stephen's story cannot end well. It started off terrible and has only gotten worse. I'm grateful that he was willing to speak with me and share his experiences so we can learn from his tragic life. But I can't imagine any outcome that brings him real peace. There are an unknown but large number of victims of CSA who are technically survivors because they did not die, but who do not consider themselves as having recovered from their abuse. CSA is not a crime that can be repaid with some punishment or monetary fine. It is a traumatic experience that can have disastrous consequences for the victim, their loved ones, and society. Those children grow up. Some of them become self-destructive. Some become criminals. Some emulate their abusers. And some get revenge. Stephen Sanderson is a textbook example of how child abuse can result in violent crime. We all have an interest in preventing child abuse, because child protection is crime prevention. And that's the story of Stephen J. Sanderson. A question that people ask me a lot is why I've never covered Tub Girl on this channel. I mean, at this point, I've covered most of the big shock sites. And my answer to that is pretty similar to what my answer for Lemon Party was. That being that there's just not a lot of information out there about the image itself. That being said though, this being one of the biggest classic shock sites around, there is still a lot of lore around it to be covered. And I did come across something that may or may not tell us who was actually behind it. So for today's episode, let's take a look at Tub Girl. Well, I mean, not literally take a look at Tub Girl, because, I like to still have a YouTube channel. But you know what I mean. I guess it would make sense for me to start this video by describing the Tub Girl image. It's easy for me to take for granted that all of you have seen it before, but I was surprised to find out how many of you hadn't seen Goatsy before, hadn't seen Lemon Party before, never saw Pain Olympics until you saw my video. So let me try and paint as vivid a picture as possible here. You got a woman lying on her back in a bathtub. She's bent herself completely in half, got her legs behind her head holding her toes in her hands. She's completely naked except for a pair of white, at least originally white, stockings. And she's wearing a mask of some sort. Originally it registered to me as kind of like a Patrick Bateman sort of mask. But taking a closer look, it's more of a pointy 70s superhero mask, kind of like a Marvel Girl type of deal. But most importantly, there's a giant orangey stream of what appears to be diarrhea shooting out of her puckered rectum, arcing high up into the air and splattering all over her face. And that photographer really caught it at the exact perfect moment. It's a very solid stream at this point, like one of those artsy model photo shoots. Which I guess by some definitions, it kind of is an artsy model photo shoot. I mean, not for nothing, taking a closer look at it now, people used to make comments about how it's a very well-composed artistic image, and I always thought of these comments as being a bit tongue-in-cheek, and for the most part they probably were. But this thing really is more well-planned and more well-composed than your usual smut. And although there's a complete lack of context around this photo, the way it's selectively censored seems to indicate that it's from Japan. So this image is floating around on the internet in the early 2000s, before eventually winding up on tubgirl.com in 2002. It was that site where most people would become unintentionally familiar with it. You know how it goes by now, the old deal of you send it to your friend on AIM and they're like, hey, check out this crazy website I found. They're just like, fucking just poop splatter on her face. And there's actually a lot of debate over where this image first emerged. Some sources credit the website Consumption Junction. If you don't remember Consumption Junction, the best way I can describe it, imagine if Rotten.com had a baby with E-Bombs World. It was largely a mix of user-submitted content that was kind of a mix of funny stuff and fucked up stuff. This is how they describe themselves. With all that technology and the internet have to offer, most websites still ignore the fundamental element that drives everything: people. And what do we know about people? People are fucking sick. Remove us from the trappings of civilization and morality, and we're just a tribe of shaved apes who like to fuck, laugh, and watch things die. Stop denying your instincts. Interestingly enough, the website tubgirl.com would eventually come to redirect directly to Consumption Junction, leading me to believe that that website was likely created by someone associated with Consumption Junction. Ultimately, Consumption Junction itself was sold, and it still exists currently, but it's just a normal porn site now. Although it's kind of funny to me that they still keep the vintage logo. Other sources claim that the image originated on Style Project. Style Project is a website that I feel like more of you are going to be familiar with. It just constantly found itself in the middle of controversy, often regarded, especially in its time, as the most fucked up website on the internet. So much so that it's actually the only time I've ever seen a website literally excluded from the Internet Archive. And at the same time, it had a big hand in shaping that early internet culture in a way that most shock content aggregators just didn't. It was sold in 2010, and currently, like Consumption Junction, it's also just a porn site. I'll probably go more in depth about the site itself in a future video, but honestly, I don't think the source of TubGirl was either of these websites, because every reference to them being so seems to point to the year 2001. Meanwhile, it appeared on Rotten.com in December of 2000, with the caption, "It just shows how far Ali Sheedy's career has gone." That being said though, if you look at either the Consumption Junction upload or the Rotten.com upload, they each have a watermark that takes up the bottom of the picture. Later uploads of this image have the watermarked part of the picture simply cropped out entirely. But both of these sites featured the full image, which means that there had to be an unedited version of it floating around earlier that both of these sites had access to. And in that regard, a lot of people seem to point to the Something Awful forums as the actual origin of this image online. And considering how much stuff, especially in that time period, would pop up there first before spreading everywhere, it sounds like a really reasonable theory. So it goes through the usual cycle that shock sites did at the time. You got people tricking each other into looking at it, people making reaction videos to it. The initial interest peaks in the summer of 2005 and then again in 2007. It was in 2007 that perhaps one of the most infamous TubGirl incidents happened. It was on October 19th of 2007 that TubGirl was posted to the front page of Kotaku. It would remain there for 20 whole minutes. Eventually it was taken down and Kotaku would issue an apology. While I have control over what our writers do and can control to some extent what our readers do, I unfortunately have no control over what other Gawker editors do. Today, one took it upon themselves to post a very inappropriate photo on the top of Kotaku using someone else's name. We immediately worked to have it removed, but thanks to the inner tubes, the photo was on the top of the site for 20 minutes. There are jokes. I don't mind being the butt of them, but I do mind someone ruining the credibility I have worked so hard to build and maintain. I apologize deeply for having that photo pop up on top of our site and also into your office, your home, and probably indelibly into your mind. It would later be revealed that the image was posted by Gizmodo editor Brian Lamb. This had all been a prank related to a Halo competition between the two websites. And surprisingly, after making his own apology, Brian was allowed to keep his job. It was also around this time that a second TubGirl image would emerge. I mean, there were already lots of parodies and copycats, but I mean a second image that appears to be from the same origin. It appears to be the same woman in the same position in the same tub. But this time she's wearing fishnet stockings with red lace, and she's wearing a blindfold instead of a mask. Instead of blurring her vag, there's a piece of paper with a crude drawing on it. And the liquid is all over the place instead of one solid, laser-targeted arcing stream. Some theorize that the lack of precision and artfulness in this particular shot seemed to point to the fact that this was an earlier version of it. A bit of a not-so-dry run, if you will. From that point on, though, TubGirl would kind of just remain in the background of the internet. A touchstone of our shared culture of years gone by, occasionally popping back into view from time to time. But then in 2021 and 2022, it would get another burst of popularity due to TikTok. TikTokers began to discover it for the first time through a trend where they would record themselves before and after looking at Tub Girl. And that all basically brings us to the present day. Now, this is a video that I've tried to make a few times, but I've just never been satisfied with the amount of information I can dig up about the actual photo. Looking around, funny enough, I found references to something that I saw described as an interview with Tub Girl, only to realize the person they were calling Tub Girl was Leah Beldam because she's in that tub scene in The Shining. But there is something else that purports to be an interview with the actual Tub Girl. Posted to the bike chat forums by Ariel Badger in October of 2009. Conducted by someone named Simon D'Arte, who I could not find anything about. Needless to say, I have no idea if this interview is legitimate. But if it is, there might be some useful information in it. So here's the interview. May I thank you for agreeing to talk with us. What should we call you? Hi, just call me Tub Girl. You do have another name. Yes, of course I do. But you do not want to interview her, you want to interview Tub Girl. Okay, Tub Girl, you look much more normal in real life than in the image of you that most of us are used to. You seem to have lost a few pounds and are strikingly pretty. Thank you. The entire Tub Girl was a performance that we'd been planning for months. TF, the photographer, had requested I should put on 12 kilograms for the shoot, and I hid my face in the famous yellow mask. What was the significance of the mask? It gave me anonymity. I could be any woman, your wife, your mother, your sister, and of course, the Virgin Mary. It protected and at the same time removed the me from the shot. It showed how we covert and dehumanize women. Do you still have it? No, it was stolen and is now in the collection of a Japanese businessman. What was the meaning of the Tub Girl photo for you? It is about womanhood, how woman is the center of life, how she nourishes, eats, and of course, the valuable things that come from her body. The gush of diarrhea is symbolic. It is a symbol of joy and happiness. It is all about life and birth. In that one moment of pure beauty, we see the circle of life from anus to mouth, the perfection of yin and yang.
What in God's holy name are you blathering about?
One of the enduring mysteries of the picture is eugenitalia. They seem to be pixelated in an act of savage censorship. As I said, I could be the Virgin Mary at that moment. The desecration of the pudenda was a deliberate artistic act. Do both emphasize and deny me of the means of reproduction. I am mother to none and mother to all. Thank you, it has been a pleasure to meet you. This interview, if it's legitimate, seems like it's either poorly translated or transcribed from a video of some sort. All things considered though, I can 100% buy into the idea that Tub Girl was intended to be an art piece. Like, even knowing that there are people who get off to this sort of thing, it doesn't seem like the kind of thing that was made specifically to get someone off. There's just simply too much work here put into getting the shot right. Especially if that second image that emerged was kind of a test image. And if it's the case that this interview is legitimate, then I guess we know that the photographer's initials are TF. I'm not well versed in the world of art photography, but if any of you are and know of a TF who does stuff like this, that could be our guy. But that's pretty much all we know at this point. Cowboys, the Wild West, are among the most classic subjects of all music. You got legendary songs like Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi, Cowboys from Hell by Pantera, Cowboy by Kid Rock. The list just goes on. But of all the artists who write about cowboys, by a very, very large margin, there's none more prolific than a man named Grant McDonald. And you see, the thing about Grant's cowboys, they're naked, and they're throbbing. That's right, for this video, we're gonna take a look at Ram Ranch. Our cowboy tale begins in, of all places, Canada. In another life, Grant McDonald, the hero of this tale, was actually an investment banker. Eventually though, he would bore of this career path and leave the field to pursue his creative interests. And he tried a bunch of different outlets for this. Visual art, acting, erotica. And throughout all of his work there was a consistent theme. That theme being homosexuality, because you know, he's gay. And that was no different when he began making music in the summer of 2012. That August, he wrote several songs about the risque side of cowboys. And he was very proud of what he made. so he attempted to pitch these songs to radio stations right in the heart of country music, Nashville. But the artist was instead met with backlash as they rejected all 3 of his gay country anthems. And in that moment, he swore revenge for what he saw as homophobia. In anger, he downloads a royalty-free metal instrumental and begins writing what would eventually become his magnum opus, that of course being Ram Ranch.
"18 naked cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch. Big herd throbbing cocks wanting to be sucked. 18 naked cowboys wanted to be fucked."
Now, in fairness to Nashville, you can listen to the stuff he was submitting. Not only do they follow the same formula as Ram Ranch, but they're just as explicit. I mean, look at some of the titles from the album Cowboy Butt. You got Sucking Cowboy, You Sure Are Hung, and of course, Sucking Hard Cowboy Cock. There very well may have been some homophobia at play in their decision, but I can't say for sure that refusing to play a song called Sucking Hard Cowboy Cock is proof of that. I mean, if I was on the radio, I would play that song, but the FCC might not be too happy with me. In any case, Ram Ranch was released without radio support on August 30th of 2012, though it went mostly unnoticed for years. Its first recognition came in 2014 on Reddit's r/WTF. The author of the thread claimed to have received a mysterious package containing one of Grant's CDs. Naturally, commenters were taken aback by the names of these songs and started investigating, and they quickly found Grant's music online, discovering that he at this point had made over 212 songs. While laughing at the absurdity of it all, some couldn't help but remark that it felt like there was something more at play here. I couldn't help but notice he's rap and country. Those are basically the least gay-friendly genres, so I can't help but think he's some kind of mad genius. If we had received that album at the radio station I was at, you can be damn sure we would have listened to it. It's not the gay parts that's WTF, it's how over the top it is. Even within this massive sea of music, the users fixated on Ram Ranch. There's just something about this song that made it stick out above all the rest. And one user loved it so much that he actually decided to play it on the radio station that he worked at. A lot of people warned him that he might get fired for this, but you know, in my opinion, and clearly this poster's opinion, it was worth it. So he ended up playing it during their Sunday night metal show to surprisingly no complaints. This thread was essentially the first time anyone had acknowledged Grant's music online, but it was far from the last. Months later, the song was uploaded to YouTube, which planted the seed for its eventual explosion. In early 2016, the Twitch streamer Ice Poseidon began taking song requests through donations. He allowed viewers to play music without screening the songs. Naturally, this resulted in a lot of trolling, mostly, raps with naughty words or obnoxiously loud ear rape mixes. And his fans were just out there hunting for the most weird, abrasive, or offensive stuff they can make him play, which ultimately leads them to Ram Ranch. And Ram Ranch instantly becomes a staple in the community. Within months, the YouTube uploaded song racks up hundreds of thousands of plays. This format as a whole proved to be really successful, and as a result of it, Ice's channel grew immensely. And it wasn't long till other streamers took note. And of course, Ram Ranch followed with them, started to be spammed in Forsen's community before making its way across the entire site. It gets so popular that Twitch itself, with its famously inconsistent and inscrutable moderation, gets involved. In August, they start banning streamers who play the song for explicit content. That includes personally warning Forsen off-stream about its lyrics. This decision, as you might expect, pissed off a lot of viewers. And they were quick to point out a double standard where there's all kinds of sexually suggestive content on the site, and in comparison, what's so bad about merely singing about throbbing cowboy cocks, if you could have half your actual ass out for all to see? So in protest of this, a safe version of the song was made.
18 fully clothed cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch. Limp, flaccid, relaxed sexual organs, wanting to be left alone. 18 fully clothed cowboys wanting to read a good book. Cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch. Standing around not wanting to engage in homosexuality. Ram Ranch really rocks.
Judging by the fact that this upload got 200,000 views, it's clear that nothing could stop the momentum of Ram Ranch. And the song continues to grow in notoriety throughout 2017, and it escapes Twitch. It catches on in online games as a popular form of mic spam. People start making YouTube poops and other kinds of parodies.
Cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch on their knees wanting to suck cowboy cocks. Ram Ranch really rocks.
It gets so big that eventually Twitch just has to end their ban on the song, so that streamers don't have to worry about their channel getting accidentally banned over a meme. That November, Asian Andy uploaded a video of himself playing the song in public at BlizzCon.
So, if I give you like $100, will you play Ram Ranch for me?
Wait, play what?
Ram Ranch?
Sure.
You know the song?
Yeah, I'll play it.
Oh, shit!
Naked cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch. Big head throbbing cocks wanting to be
Holy
sucked.
shit! They're doing it! Yeah! What the fuck?
Cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch on their knees.
These wanting to suck cowboy cocks!
It received over 600,000 views. 1 month later, UCOG played the track in Guitar Hero without knowing what it was beforehand, and this clip garnered 1.8 million views. Which, I mean, how could it not? Just watch his face as he's digging the guitar riff, and then he hears the lyrics for the first time while simultaneously focusing on hitting the right notes.
Ooh. 18 naked cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch. Big herd throbbing cocks wanting to be sucked. 18 naked cowboys wanted to be fucked. Cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch on their knees wanting to suck cowboy cocks. Ram Ranch really rocks.
Ram Ranch was officially a staple of internet culture, and this didn't go unnoticed by its creator. That same year, in the wake of the song's skyrocketing popularity, Grant begins making new versions of Ram Ranch. He'd actually been asked to do this in the past, but previously was hesitant to do it. He didn't want to taint his masterpiece. He recalls, "At first, I was like, that's like Pink Floyd putting out Dark Side of the Moon too. But I figured if George Lucas can put out 7 Star Wars movies, I can put out Ram Ranch too." The first was a re-upload of the original with a different image, which went on to accumulate 20 million views. But he'd go on to create over 1,200 songs, with some of these songs lasting up to 20 minutes. What I'd give to have even a fraction of this guy's work ethic, and he just spends it all on naked cowboys. The most popular of these sequels wound up being Ram Ranch 7, which, no, the numbers actually have nothing to do with what order of song they are, because that'd make too much sense. With over 2 million views, this one is about the US Marines holding Ram Ranch under siege.
Yeah, 28 US Marines pulling up in black Ford Raptor trucks, helicopters landed. Ram Ranch is under siege, under lockdown. US Marines are gonna fuck Ram Ranch cowboy butts.
Oh yeah, there's Ram Ranch lore now. There's a whole Ram Ranch expanded universe. Ram Ranch continued to be popular over the years as some kind of internet oddity, and Grant accumulated a sizable fan base with this, with over 70,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Although none of them seemed to make quite as big a splash as Ram Ranch, his fans eagerly awaited every new song. But by 2022, it seemed like Ram Ranch was set to die out, as memes tend to do. Frankly, this meme had a much longer shelf life than most do. And shockingly, not only would it re-enter the public consciousness, not only would it become even more popular than ever before, but it would actually have an impact on the Canadian political landscape. In early 2022, hundreds of Canadian truckers organized a nationwide protest called the Freedom Convoy to fight against the federal vaccine mandate. It was an extremely divisive moment in Canadian history. Whereas it went on, you would have a lot of people supporting the truckers, but then you also had a lot of people who were opposed to their views, and then there were others who were simply angry about their behavior, with reports of disruption, harassment, and property damage from the truckers. Before long, enough people were inflamed by this that they started a counter-movement against them, which led them to Zello, a walkie-talkie phone app that was the convoy's main form of communication. Ops began infiltrating their Zello channel to jam it with none other than Ram Ranch.
It's come to my attention that this group has been infiltrated. They set out to have one goal in mind, and the goal kind of worked its way in the inner circle, and it actually worked. Didn't actually think it was going to work. It was kind of a little too easy, if I'm being quite honest.
Naked cowboys wanted to be Cowboys in the Showers at Ram Ranch.
This clip goes viral, inspiring more and more people to join in on the campaign, a movement that's eventually dubbed the Ram Ranch Resistance. They used the hashtag to share information and coordinate with each other, and they also created Ram Ranch CA to promote charities and organizations impacted by the convoy. Signs reading "Welcome to Ram Ranch" started to show up in real life. And some even took to Tinder to match with protesters, set up meetings, and then direct them to Ram Ranch. And through all of this, the jamming continued, resulting in 3 separate Zello channels shutting down. And this moment right here is actually where Ram Ranch peaks in popularity. Given that Grant himself was Canadian, it wasn't long before he heard about all this. He was first informed by his nephew, and he was worried that the song had become popular with the truckers who he was not a fan of. Upon learning it was actually the opposite, he became ecstatic. Grant states in an interview, "I couldn't have been happier when I heard it was the anti-convoy group using the song. I love how it plays with the truckers' heads." And in response, he'd create a new song, a 20-minute long track entitled Ottawa Truckers. It is, as you might have guessed, about the truckers getting penetrated by the cowboys of Ram Ranch.
Yo, what do we see? At Parliament Hill, Ottawa, Canada, trucker boys in their big rigs, in their sleepers, stark naked, holy jeepers creepers, being butt-fucked by the Ram Ranch cowboys.
The convoy ends on February 23rd, with the Ram Ranch Resistance disbanding soon after. And in the aftermath, Grant continued to do what he did best, making songs about gay guys doing gay stuff. For a while, everything seemed to be as it should have. That is, until very recently. In researching this video, I came to the discovery that the original Ram Ranch video is gone. Not only that, Grant McDonald's entire channel is gone. It seems that in March of this year, his account was terminated for unknown reasons. It's not clear if this was due to graphic content or some kind of copyright issues, but all of his videos are no longer available. The only comment that Grant himself has given on this situation comes from the Ram Ranch subreddit. He blames the termination on Gordon Getty, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and Sergey Brin. And he didn't elaborate beyond naming them. So it's not really anything to go off of in terms of why specifically it's gone. To me, it seems more likely that it was some kind of community guidelines issue, but it's odd that Ram Ranch would have had so many problems with this. Because during past controversies with more mainstream musicians, YouTube has explicitly stated that its content rules are more permissive on music and things that it deems to be artistic expression. Yet, based on its lyrical content, it has faced issues from both Twitch and YouTube. And this all really harkens back to why Ram Ranch was made in the first place. Grant's legendary gay cowboy anthem was made simply to spite those who would censor his work. To see it become so controversial beyond the Nashville country scene, to the point of testing content policies and inspiring political movements, it's a testament to just how successful he was at this goal. But still, it's a complete injustice that this legendary video has been removed. But at the very least, Grant seems undeterred. He's continued making songs and posting them to the aforementioned subreddit, and it seems that he's dedicated to continuing the tradition no matter how small the audience. But anyway, for now, that's the story of Ram Ranch. Right now, some of you guys are probably like, hey, I already thought you had a Blowfly Girl video. So allow me to clear up the confusion. Originally, I released my Blowfly Girl coverage in 2 parts. The first video being on Storyfire covering the original Blowfly Girl story, and the second one on YouTube covering the lore behind the blog. So I wanted to upload the Storyfire part like I've been doing with my old Storyfire videos, and I figured it would just make more sense to combine both parts into one. And if you have no idea what Blowfly Girl is, get yourself a succulent Greek meal, and sit back and enjoy. For my very first Storyfire exclusive, I decided that I would cover one of my most requested videos of all time. That being, the story of Blowfly Girl. I think it's a perfect start for me on this platform because rereading the story, I'm not so sure that I can get away with it on YouTube. I've gotten away with a lot on that platform, a lot more than I ever thought that I possibly could, but this one, I'm not so sure. But Storyfire, thankfully, has given me the opportunity to take the gloves off and just do what I'm gonna do. All that being said, this video is very, very obviously not intended for anybody underage, anybody squeamish, or prone to vomiting. But anyway, without further ado, I present to you the story of Blowfly Girl. Sunday was warm and sunny. Just how I always fantasized it would be when I finally went through with it. I started walking to the dumpster again, I think about 2 p.m., and I was really excited and nervous. I felt butterflies in my tummy, just anticipating what I was about to do. And this opening passage right away demonstrates something to me that I think is a very interesting aspect of the Blowfly Girl's story. It often gets passed around as a true story, yet the writing of it feels very prosaic, almost as if it were a fictional fantasy story. The dumpster is in the alley behind a restaurant near my house. It gets emptied on Tuesdays, so by Sunday, it's pretty stinky and there are flies buzzing around. Which means there are things rotting inside there, and that's just perfect for me. A few times in the past, I climbed into that dumpster and masturbated. Nothing too intense. Most I'd ever done was take off my pants and hump against the dirty garbage bags. And one time I laid there with my eggs spread watching the flies land on me. So anyway, I walked down the alley to the dumpster, and as usual I made sure nobody was around, just to be extra careful. You have to go behind a tall wooden fence to even see the dumpster, and the restaurant is closed on Sunday anyway, so I knew I wouldn't be noticed. But this time, there's no way I want to be disturbed. I climbed up and over the side and onto my hands and knees into the mass of plastic garbage bags and other miscellaneous rubbish. The bags felt warm from the sun. The smell in there was extremely foul, much worse than usual, and I knew it was because of my rotting meat. I sat and tried to get myself to relax for a few minutes. There was no reason to hurry. When I was ready, I calmly took off my sandals, my jeans, and my panties. Both pairs. I was wearing 2 pairs of tight panties with a bunch of my panty liners in the crotch, which keeps anything in my vagina from coming out when I move around. But I was going all the way this time, so I went ahead and got completely naked. That was a weird feeling, being totally nude inside the dumpster. It seemed very erotic to me. The sun felt warm on my skin, especially my boobs, which pretty much never see the sun. I took a pair of rubber kitchen gloves out of my pants pocket and put them on. There was no way I could bring myself to actually touch a maggot with my bare hands. Yeah, that's where you draw the line. You know, not any of the other stuff, not getting naked in a dumpster, but, you know, you don't want to touch a maggot with your bare hands. That's, you know, ill, that's yucky. Lying with my back against the side of the dumpster, I fingered my pussy. I was really wet already. I knew I would be. The sensation of the rubber glove against my clit felt unusual, and I kind of liked it. I did that for a little while, just thinking about what I was about to do, while staring at the smaller garbage bag in the far corner of the dumpster, where I'd left it yesterday. I still felt the butterflies in my tummy. I kept thinking to myself that I can't wimp out, that I had to go through with this. I wished for a moment that someone else was there to force me to do it, but decided that it was somehow much more sick and depraved to do it to myself willingly. And I thought, yeah, that's me. That's what I want. I deserve this. And so I knew it was time to do it. I got back on my hands and knees and crawled to the other side of the dumpster. I sat down next to my garbage bag, gently picked it up, and placed it in front of me. The terrible smell was already stronger. Carefully, I tore the bag open, and there they were. There had to be thousands of maggots, kind of beige yellow, with little black spots on them, all writhing in a large mass. I couldn't even see the rotting meat underneath them. Dozens more maggots clung to the inside of the black plastic, which was coated with a thick, light brown slime. It was such a repulsive sight, I thought I was going to throw up right there, but I didn't. I took a few minutes to get control of myself, fingering my clit while staring at the maggots, trying to work up the courage to continue. I scooped up some of the slime on my gloved finger and brought it to my nose. I knew what it was from the reading I'd done before. It was digestive juices from the maggots, full of bacteria. And it smelled just horrible. I thought to myself, that's what I'm going to smell like. That's the stench that's going to come from my vagina. I want that, I thought, spreading my legs wide apart. I dragged my slimy finger between my pussy lips. My clit felt like a hard little pebble beneath the slime. I didn't want to come right then, though, and I was still right on the edge of gagging, too. But I knew there was no turning back now, so I let my fingers lightly touch the top of the maggot mass. The maggots felt like nothing I'd experienced before. They seemed to have such energy, totally different from picking up an earthworm or something, and they felt so alive. I was fascinated and nauseated at the same time. Sinking my fingers into the mass, I felt the solid meat beneath. Gently breaking it apart, I could see that the meat had turned gray, except for the very center, which was still pink, and that the maggots had penetrated into it, but not too deeply yet. There was still plenty of food for my filthy little babies. I broke off a small chunk of meat that was covered on one side with the maggots, and held it for a moment when I fought back another urge to vomit. It was finally time, I thought. I leaned forward, and holding my pussy lips apart with one hand, I gritted my teeth, and pushed the maggot-covered chunk of meat into my vagina. And then, totally without expecting it, I had an orgasm. A quick, sharp one that only made me want more. And more was coming. I broke off another small chunk of meat, along with another part of the maggot mass, and pushed it inside me. This one had more maggots on it, and I stopped for a moment to see if I could feel them inside me. I wasn't sure if I could, but it didn't matter. I wanted them all. I needed to take them all inside me. With that thought, I went sorta wild. I started pushing bigger chunks of meat and maggots, and even handfuls of just maggots into me, over and over. I was practically hyperventilating too. I wasn't thinking at all about the noise I must have been making, but now, I could definitely feel the maggots squirming inside my vagina. Just the idea of it made me come again. Finally, once I had crammed all the rotten meat and all the maggots I could inside me, I felt so filthy, so disgusting, like I'd turned myself into some low, depraved sort of beast. And that made me so incredibly hot, together with the constant movement of the maggots inside me. But it was time to go. Holding my hand over my crotch, I slowly crawled back to my clothes and managed to get dressed again without anything coming out. I put the gloves back into my pocket and climbed out of the dumpster. And right then, I could hold back the revulsion of what I'd just done no longer. Holding myself up against the side of the dumpster, I threw up. Ever vomited while you were horny? It's weird. Walking home down the alley, I felt like I was in a daze. I kept asking myself how I could have done this to myself, but then asking why I'd waited so long. I had to walk slowly to make sure nothing got squeezed out of my vagina, but also to keep from coming again. I had found myself amazed at the whole thing, that I'd stuffed the most intimate part of myself with these things that were too disgusting to even touch without gloves. And that, I was totally getting off on it. Okay, so at least she also recognized the inconsistency of not wanting to touch the maggots with your bare hands, but then you just, you shove them all up in you. Once I was home, I locked myself in my bedroom, took off my clothes except for my double panties, and got into bed. I closed my eyes and just let myself feel the maggots squirming inside me. For a while, I tried to watch TV, but I couldn't really pay attention to it. The maggots were too wonderfully distracting. I skipped dinner. Later on, when I really had to pee, I did it by taking down my panties and holding my hand over my crotch, wearing the rubber gloves, of course. The next morning, I called off of work after being awake most of the night. I mainly stayed naked on my bed all day masturbating, barely getting up for anything. I wanted to do nothing but let my nauseating little babies grow inside my pussy. Pretty early though, I realized the smell was getting really horrible. I opened the window. I also wet a bath towel and stuffed it under my bedroom door. I didn't want my parents to get suspicious. A little later on, I realized that I didn't need the panties to hold the maggots and the meat inside me. The mass pretty much stayed in place as long as I laid kind of still. I thought, hey, I guess that means I'm infested, which made me come again. I was always right on the edge of orgasm, and it didn't take much to go over the edge. I also noticed that the maggots seemed to be more active if I kept my legs apart, and realized that they probably needed to breathe. Pet care 101. So that's how I stayed a lot of the time. I did get up and read my email and posted an update on my webpage, but I couldn't seem to think clearly enough to write much. Then I had to pee again, but I just didn't want to get up. So I just peed in the bed. It made me come. I just wanted to keep feeling the maggots moving, and they were. They seemed even stronger in anything. I was totally in heaven with it. I didn't eat at all either. I heard my parents come home from work. During the evening, my mom said hello through the door and wondered why I was staying in my room like a hermit. I said I was reading a novel all the way through at once, which I actually do sometimes. She left me alone. I hope she didn't smell anything. I surfed the web for a while that night and looked at porn. I came a few more times. I decided to go ahead and take a shit in my bed, right where I was. As one does, that just made me more turned on, and I ended up smearing some of my shit over my thighs and my pussy and coming again. I noticed that the maggots started coming out a bit. Maybe they liked the shit. A couple times, one would creep up on my belly. I just flick it back down between my legs. I was getting tired at that point. It really was time to sleep, and my vagina was throbbing and kind of sore from all the attention. But I was most worried about making sure my maggots could breathe while I was sleeping. Somehow, I managed to find the energy to place a chair on either side of my bed and use sheets to tie my ankles to them. That would keep my legs apart during the night. I pulled the blankets over myself and dozed off lying in my piss and shit. For the most part, I slept through the night, but I kept waking up sweating with my vagina throbbing worse. I knew I was getting a bad infection from this, but I didn't care. I was not thinking right. I could also feel maggots crawling all over me. I guess I decided I liked that, and I'd play with my clit until I came again. I don't know if I realized at the time that I wasn't wearing the rubber gloves anymore. I'd fall back to sleep and wake up again later with little phrases running through my head. Other girls have babies, but I give birth to decay and filth, I'd keep thinking to myself. Or, I'd say I'm probably ruining my womb and I don't care. I want to be ruined. I know I must have been hallucinating from the infection. I was hoping the maggots had given up on the rotten meat and were eating my vagina instead. My fingers were buried inside my vagina, with my fingertips against part of the meat. Whenever I pressed on it, the maggots would squirm faster and I'd climax again. I could do it over and over and keep coming. Finally, it was Tuesday morning and sunlight made me wake up. I knew I was really sick at that point. I felt weak and dizzy. I knew I had a fever, and now my whole lower belly was sore and throbbing. Despite all that, I was still horny and I was right on the edge of coming. And then for some reason, all I wanted to do was see my maggots. I pulled the blankets aside and saw that I really did have maggots crawling all over my body. I was so whacked out, I loved it. But I also saw that I had a rash spreading over my tummy and my thighs, and I was soaked with sweat. And then suddenly, I needed to see what it looked like between my legs. I sat up a little, picked up the hand mirror I have on the table next to my bed, and held it between my thighs. My pussy was totally gaped wide open. I'd never seen it like that before. It reminded me of a mouth in a sick, gagging expression. My inner lips were swollen and dark purple, almost black, while my outer lips were cherry red and I was losing a layer of dead skin, like a sunburn. A stream of the light brown slime was oozing from inside my vagina and down my butt crack onto the shitty mattress. Although I could still feel a large mass of maggots and rotten meat inside me, there were maggots everywhere between my legs, hundreds of them. And then I saw my fingers on my pussy. They plunged deep into my vagina and dragged out a wad of slime and maggots, which I pressed hard against my clit. I remember having a huge orgasm right then, and I must have passed out. I think I was sobbing too, but I'm not sure. That's all I remember until I woke up in the hospital. And thus concludes the story of Blowfly Girl. And now back to the question that always comes up with this story. Is it real or is it bullshit? Although the detailed, flowery, prosaic nature of the writing and the story arc that follows what seems like something taken literally out of a hentai manga leads me to believe that this is probably fiction, there actually is more to this story. You see, Blowfly Girl maintained a blog for several years, tracing all the way back to GeoCities. So stick around for my next video that takes a look at the person behind this story. I've gotten away with a lot on this channel that I never would have expected to. The jar, the scissors, the bacon, the box, But there's one story that I've been asked to cover several times throughout the years, and whenever I go back and read it, I think to myself, I'm not so sure YouTube's gonna let me get away with it this time. Maybe I don't want to push my luck. Of course, since you've read the title of this video, you know that what I'm talking about is Blowfly Girl. And I don't really know what would happen. Maybe they'd let me get away with it, maybe they'd give me a strike, maybe they'd monetize it like they monetized the Cumbox video, who knows? It's like a game of chicken that I play every time I upload one of these kinds of videos, so here's what I'm gonna do this time. I've uploaded my take on the Blowfly Girl story itself onto Storyfire, a new platform by McJuggernuggets that is going to let me get away with these kinds of things without having to worry about it. I'll put the link to that video in a pinned comment down below. But that being said, there's a lot more to Blowfly Girl than just the infamous story itself, and that's what I want to explore in this video. The history of Blowfly Girl, and inside the mind of the author herself. Blowfly Girl is probably the most infamous copy pasta of all copy pastas. And although, as I said, I'm not going to be reading the story itself on YouTube, I will give you a summary of it. Blowfly Girl tells the story of a woman with a fetish for filth and maggots. One day, she repeats her ritual of secretly pleasuring herself inside of a dumpster. Inside this dumpster, she had left behind a plastic garbage bag full of rotting meat, which had now become infested with maggots. She takes this concoction of food and bugs and shoves it inside herself, which she derives great enjoyment from. She drives back home while carrying her precious cargo, which she enjoys for a few days, and as she put it herself, other girls have babies, but I give birth to decay and filth. The story ends when she develops a severe infection and wakes up in a hospital. Sounds like fiction, right? This wild, prosaic story that sounds like something ripped from the pages of a Guro manga. Yet, during my research, I found out that such things do occur, and in fact, there exists a video depicting this very thing, which I'm not going to show you for very obvious reasons. So what's the deal with this story? Where did it come from? A lot of people think that this story simply appeared one day on 4chan. In fact, some sources point to a specific thread on B in May of 2007. And although this thread on B definitely contributed to the popularization of the story, it had been floating around the internet for some time. The first thing we need to look at is its name, Blowfly Girl. The thing is, although this story is often called Blowfly Girl, that's not actually the name of the story. Rather, Blowfly Girl is the name of the author, and the story itself is something she merely refers to as her maggot story. And this maggot story created by Blowfly Girl can be traced back much further, all the way to GeoCities. Unfortunately, Blowfly Girl's GeoCities page was terminated in 2005, presumably due to its content. And if you try to look at her original account on the Internet Archive, it's behind an adult content warning, meaning that you had to log in to get to it, which means that the Internet Archive wasn't able to save it. So the very first incarnation of Blowfly Girl does not appear to have been preserved in any way, but if you have it, I'd love to see it. After the termination of her account, Blowfly Girl would return in the new year on January 1st, 2006, this time with a new Yahoo account. Yahoo ID, Blowfly Girl 2. Real name, Deborah. Nickname, Blowfly Girl. Location, Northeastern Illinois. Age, 27. Marital status, single. Sex, female. Hobbies, slowly destroying myself, using my own sick perversions as a weapon, descending into the depraved little hell I've created for myself. It all makes me come. Latest news. I can hardly wait for it to get warmer here so the flies will come back and deposit their repulsive little spawn for me, so I could feel them moving and growing inside me again. I want the maggots to make love to me and ruin me. Favorite quote. I'd like it if you'd look at my profile before you IM me. She also made single blog posts. Entry for January 1st, 2006. It's a new year and I guess that means it's time to start new things, like this blog. Yahoo deleted my old GeoCities page a few months ago. Lost all of my contacts. Hopefully, this will last longer. This first blog post had 5 comments indicating that the story had already been spreading around the internet at some point, and in particular, a man named Richard had been telling people about it. This new blog, however, would quickly fall to the wayside as Blowfly Girl would make a different blog, this time on a site called Multiply. Blowfly Girl would post on Multiply throughout the next few years, but unfortunately, in 2009, this blog too was deleted. And unfortunately, like her original GeoCities page, this too was not archived. After her Multiply account was deleted, Blowfly Girl wouldn't be heard from for another few months until she created the Blogspot account, which is active until this very day. Saturday, August 22nd, 2009. Here I am. It's been a really long time since I posted anything. I lost my job several months ago, and about the same time, Multiply killed my profile there. That's where had I moved all my pics and blog entries to, so it's all gone. The only other place my pics were saved was on a PC at work. So anyway, I was really unhappy and just didn't feel like communicating publicly anymore. Maybe I'm ready to start again now. There was a story I wrote about my first sexual adventure with maggots. I thought I'd lost that too until I discovered that it's been reposted all over the web. It seems to be famous. I'll put that up here if this turns out to be a good place. I wrote about my second time too, but it looks like nobody reposted that. It must be really gone. It had to do with a dead deer I found close to I-94 in Wisconsin about this time last summer. If anyone has seen it around, please let me know. I've realized that if too much time passes, I don't write very well. I couldn't possibly rewrite it. I'm going to be 29 next month. I haven't had a boyfriend or even been with a man since I was 18. My parents don't want to deal with me because I still refuse to go back to counseling. I'm working at Target now, and I barely have enough money to keep my apartment and keep my car running. I do make a little extra money doing alterations on dresses, but it's not much. I don't have any future plans for myself. I don't have any marketable skills, I'm totally out of shape, and I've gained some weight. I'm up to a size 14 now. And as hard as I've tried to change, I still feel like I'm a sick, perverse, filthy pig inside. I've tried to ignore the desires and disgusting ideas that come into my head. Dangerous things for me to do, forcing myself to get off. I always hope I'll change. I've been forcing myself to try, but the ideas never stop coming. So where does that leave me now? I continue to struggle against my talent for failure. Pretending to be a normal woman while living in fear of backsliding and doing something really bad to myself. I picture myself, in metaphor, walking and falling into an open manhole, hanging onto the edge with my fingertips and struggling to pull myself out. I keep falling in, over and over, and for a long time I've been able to get out each time, but I just don't have the energy to struggle anymore. I want to let myself fall into the sewer now, and let myself sink into everything that is dark, dangerous, filthy, and perverse. Years of writing, photos, and memories wiped out in an instant. Every single thing she had ever done online would be gone were it not for the fact that her one maggot story became insanely internet famous. And this first post gives an interesting insight into Blowfly Girl's mentality. On one hand, she is miserable about how her paraphilia has negatively affected her life, but at the same time, she's very proud of the writing she's produced because of it. And shortly after she made this first post, she would go on to repost the famous maggot story on her own blog, this time receiving comments of various flavors. Jesse, thank you for showing me something new about myself. I actually found myself aroused by your story. We all have perverse parts of ourselves, and one day, we will all find someone who accepts those parts we don't like to talk about. Anonymous. The people who will accept these things about you are the people who have sick, twisted minds like you and this Blowfly Girl. You need help. Seriously. Her last post of the year would discuss being depressed during the holidays. Depression. I have a really difficult time at the holidays. For some reason, my depression gets worse this time of year. It happens to a lot of people, I guess. My problem when I feel depressed is that I don't ever get out of bed unless I have to go to work. When I spend too much time sleeping, I start having really vivid dreams. Not all nice dreams either. Her post would go on to detail the dreams, mostly involving maggots and this kind of discrepancy between her excitement over the maggots but also her fear of people finding out about them. And that December was the last she was heard from until July 4th of 2010. When she would attempt to rewrite her deer story. Dead Deer, second maggot story. A few of my old contacts have emailed me asking if I would post the story of my second encounter with maggots. It's been about 2 years since it happened, and I had written about it the next day on my Multiply page. Unfortunately, Multiply deleted the page. I lost the story and everything. I hadn't kept a copy because I did everything from a computer at work. It's all gone. A lot of detail fades over time, but I tried my best to rewrite the experience. Once I got started, some of it came back to me, and I ended up really enjoying it. I'm glad I took the time. Hopefully, I haven't misremembered anything important. It happened on a Sunday afternoon while I was driving back home from Milwaukee. I can't remember now whether it was the weekend of Summerfest or Labor Day, but it was one of the two. As I mentioned, the following Monday night I wrote the whole thing out at work and uploaded it to my Multiply page. I even got brave and took some pictures before my hands got too dirty. I uploaded a couple of those to the page too, only the ones that I felt safe showing. Not a lot of me in them, not a lot of my flabby, disgusting, pale body in them, actually. I really wish I had even those few back. Multiply didn't respond to my email when I asked. And the revelation that pictures existed shines a bit of a different light on this story. You see, one of the biggest debates around Blowfly Girl is whether this was an actual thing that happened or whether or not it was just someone's attempt at writing fiction. If actual pictures were to exist of her experiences, it would definitely lead a lot of credence to the fact that this is in fact a true story. But of course, the Multiply blog, which those pictures allegedly resided on, is now gone and has never been archived. And even if the pictures did exist, it's not necessarily proof that the events described happened, just that at some point, she was in close proximity to a maggot-ridden deer corpse. After this, her next post would be detailing her feelings about turning 30. I'll be turning 30 this month. I guess that's supposed to be a milestone, but I'm pretty sure nobody's planning a surprise party for me or anything. I can't think of anybody in my life who'd want to do that. It's my own fault for being such a loner. I don't mind turning 30. When I was younger, I had expectations about what my life would be like at 30. I was way off the mark. I thought that I'd be working professionally as a costume designer for theater and movies, living in a trendy loft condo somewhere in Lincoln Park or something, surrounded by smart, sophisticated friends. Well, none of that has materialized yet. Considering my history of not being able to hold a job for very long, I guess I should feel lucky that I'm employed at all right now, especially with the bad economy and everything. I have my own apartment and I have a car to drive, though I am still heavily subsidized by my parents, as my dad says. They don't mind. I'm sure they're very relieved that I've been emotionally stable. I guess I should set a goal to actually do something useful for myself this year. Do something besides slowly destroying myself through my perversion for filth. I mean, so far, what have I done? I nearly killed myself 6 years ago having sex with blowfly maggots, wrote about it on my old GeoCities page, and the story became mildly infamous as one of the most disgusting stories on the internet. My gynecologist says that she can tell I'm unable to get pregnant anymore. At least I'm well on my way to destroying myself. It's an achievement. Seriously though, I have to mention that I've read comments on my blog and gotten emails from people wishing me well and hoping I will seek help. If you're one of them, thank you for being concerned. Really, sincerely. You sound like nice, compassionate people, but I'm okay. While I was growing up, my parents made me go to counseling, see psychiatrists, take antidepressants, all sorts of stuff. I'm happier without any help. And I'm only a danger to myself a very small percentage of the time. There's a lot more to my life that I don't discuss on my blog that if you knew about, you'd see I'm pretty normal. And at this point, a lot of her blog starts to focus on her work situation. In particular, she's very unhappy with her low-paying Target job, but at the same time, she's very dependent on the health insurance. Especially with her frequent health issues such as the pinworm infection she developed after an interaction with a fan. The fan wrote to her about how much they appreciated her work and sent her a story called Julie's Slide into Depravity. And the thing is, Blowfly Girl had already read this story. In fact, although she commented that there were things about it that she intensely disliked, like the violence for instance, she actually credited it with helping her discover her interest in maggots. This interaction caused her to read the story one more time, and this time she became interested in one of the characters' interactions with dog shit. She went out and recreated this interaction with dog shit, and it led to her developing an unseemly pinworm infection. And it just so happened that at the time, Blowfly Girl became sick once again and was dependent on her Target health insurance that she got an offer to go back to her old job. This job, which was at a law office, was much better paying than Target, but at the same time, they didn't give health insurance, so she found herself kind of stuck in a situation because of her health problems. Ultimately, though, a few months would pass and she returned to tell her fans that she did in fact accept the job offer. New job. I'm back working in the law office now. I quit Target. That's the first time I ever left a job without being fired. How depressing is that? The attorney that I'm working for, the one who asked me to come back, is actually a friend of my dad's, going back to when I was little. I'm suspicious that he was doing my dad a favor by asking me to come back. It would explain why he's also agreed to put me on the health insurance plan the rest of the office staff is on. Yeah. Anyway, this is the best job I've ever had and I'm grateful to have a second chance at it. I don't mean to disappoint, but I've been kind of a clean girl lately. Probably just haven't been depressed enough since I started the new job. I cleaned up the apartment a little bit, enough to realize I had an ant problem last summer but didn't notice. I separated out the empty pizza boxes from the stacks of magazines too. I even put makeup on for the first time in ages. No reason, just felt good to do it. Anyway, anybody who's reading this has probably already done it, but I googled Blowfly Girl recently. I had no idea how much attention the stuff I've written has gotten. Looks like the consensus is that I must be sick in the head. Well duh. What's funny are blog comments and forums where people shock each other by posting links to my stories. She also, for the first time, confronts the ramifications of her having created this story. I'm not going to betray any confidences, but I think it's worth mentioning that I've been exchanging emails with someone who has had an experience with maggots similar to mine. She got the idea from reading about what I did. I'm pretty sure she's sincere. She knows way too much about what maggots do when you mess around with them, and how they feel in your body. Either that, or she studies insects for a living and she's just playing with me. I'm not sure how I feel about having inspired someone to do that to themselves. Her posts will become a bit more sparse throughout 2011, in part due to the fact that she got hacked and she deleted all the racist comment that the hacker posted. However, she would drop by to inform people that she did actually manage to hold down her law office job. And Blowfly Girl would return in May of 2012, which as of now is the last long-form Blowfly Girl story. Finally, some fun. It was just getting light out Monday morning when I started driving home from work. It was overcast and gray and wet and my mind was mostly on getting some sleep. But as I drove, I also began thinking about how bored I was. I really have been bored. On the spur of the moment, I decided to go have some fun. No idea what, but it's been way too long since I've had any. I had all day. I got on the Eisenhower and started heading west. Traffic was already slow and I wondered if I'd made a mistake, but soon I was on I-88, which was clear. Randomly, I exited at Route 59 by Aurora, kept driving, and started looking around for something interesting. All of a sudden, I was at Fox Valley Mall. I hadn't been there in many years. There's a road that rings the parking lots outside the mall. I drove slowly along the road, circling the mall a couple times, hoping something would catch my eye and wondering what kind of fun I can make for myself outside a mall that isn't open yet. There's a Greek restaurant on the west side of the mall. It has its own building and its own parking lot. The lot was empty. I drove around the back of the restaurant and saw a wooden enclosure where they keep their dumpster. But it was a pretty big enclosure for just the dumpster. I stopped and got out of the car to take a look. Could be interesting. And as she explored the Greek restaurant dumpster, she went on to reenact much of what happened in the original maggot story, filling herself up with octopus tentacles, chicken bones, shrimp tails, and driving all the way home without removing the contents. And she described how not depriving herself of that kind of excitement made her feel alive once again. I wasted a lot of time denying myself. It's been way more than a year since I did anything like this. I kept thinking that it was my depression that made me want to do things to myself, and that if I succumbed to the desire I'd end up backsliding again, losing my job and everything I've worked so hard for. I was, and I am really scared of that ever happening. But maybe I don't have to be dead inside all the time. I went to work last night and everything is fine. Maybe I'm a depraved, filthy pig who can also hold a job. She would post very sporadically over the course of the next few years, speaking very frankly about dealing with her depression and thanking her readers for their support. She would also speak in detail about software upgrades at her job and considering going back to school to become a paralegal. She also made a post documenting her difficulty with being intimate with people, and in particular a date with a man named Eli. She regretted not inviting him inside after he dropped her off, but she was hopeful to see him again. And after a bit of a break, she would return in 2016 to reflect on the blog as a whole. It's April 24th, 2016. I posted something. I started my Blowfly Girl blog here mostly because of the feedback I got when I shared that first experience I had with maggots. I posted that first story first on my GeoCities page, yes, that long ago. So many people had things to say to me, whether curious, concerned, disgusted, or extremely erotic, that I wanted to keep posting whenever I did anything interesting, and that's where this blog came from. I'm an extremely shy, introverted girl who found a way to share my dark side. Also, to be honest, just hearing from people who found my experiences erotic has been extremely erotic for me too. But it's been a long time. Perhaps I've changed as I've gotten older. Ironically, I fantasize now about doing things to myself that are far more extreme than anything I ever did for real, but I've lost the courage, with exceptions, to actually do them. And I wonder if people are interested in hearing anymore from an approaching middle-aged woman instead of the nicely plump, horny, and pervy young girl I was who wrote about that first experience. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be very self-conscious. Anyway, this blog isn't dead. Not yet anyway. I'll continue posting depending on what my readers email me about. I have learned that for sure that not many people are interested in my job, my dating fails, I guess things didn't work out with Eli, or my cat, though I'll happily complain about any of them upon request. Don't comment here, spam has taken over, email me. And as of now, the last post on our blog was made in January of 2017. It's a brief post in which she basically just documents her favorite comments that she's received throughout the years. I read my comments. Welcome to 2017. I have nothing new to talk about except that I read through my whole blog today. I'm actually kind of sad right now because it's been such a long time since I've done anything horrible worth writing about. I also read the comments on my blog. I never have before. Some of it is spam, obviously, and other comments are invitations to Jesus, but some of the rest are just priceless. I've been missing out. I guess this is one benefit of having a blog online for a few years. Amazed to read your blog. Funeral programs to memorial programs are gaining popularity because they provide grievers with another way of memorializing. My 10-year-old cousin read this story in front of his mother while she was eating. I don't want to live on this earth any longer. Beautiful and inspiring. I have played with roaches and cunt and ass many times. We seem to have common ground here. I'm glad you're doing well. Please don't do any more of these things, they sound dangerous, XX. The story of Blowfly Girl is really unique that it's really, at this point, a 15-plus-year-old story that made her legendary, yet she kept up the blog for so many years. And it's through this blog that we got to see into the mind of the person who wrote it, ostensibly the star of the story, and watch them evolve throughout the years. And with all that in mind, you still have to ask, was this a real story? Was it made up? Or maybe it was some kind of blend of the two, where maybe you had a person who really had these thoughts, but only ever enacted them through their writing. I'll put a poll up to see what you guys think it is.
In September of 2012, a Redditor named Kraylon was hanging out at his cousin's neighbor's house. Kraylon had only known the neighbor, who he referred to by the pseudonym Rob, for about 2 weeks. When they're in Rob's room, Kraylon begins to notice a smell. In fact, the whole room kinda smelled like doo-doo. They're sitting around and Kraylon just can't take it anymore. He has to ask, what's that smell? Rob shamefully points over to a half-open drawer, where they discover it. The cum boxers. Goddamn, that buildup looks like congealed pizza cheese. Kraylon shares the picture to Reddit and people are quick to ask, why are you touching it? So you gotta understand, it's not Kraylon touching it. It's Rob holding up his cum boxers like a trophy for all to see. All to be shared for that sweet Reddit karma. That right there is 7 years of hard work. And when asked why he didn't just use a paper towel or something like a normal person, he said he thought that was too much work. Honestly, to me that sounds like a lie. I mean, isn't it just as much work to go over to the drawer and get your designated cum boxers as it is to just, get a tissue or something? And then you're just sitting there in that stench all day. It's not like he's blind to it either, because he's clearly aware enough that when someone asks, what's that smell? He knows exactly what they're talking about. This definitely wasn't laziness. He enjoyed that shit. Nevertheless, he thought that Kraylon and his cousin were overreacting. But in any case, he was proud of all the attention his cumboxers were getting now. And that's the story of the cumboxers. Yeah, for today's episode of Tales from the Internet, we're gonna look past the cum jar, the cum box. We're gonna be taking a look at some of the lesser known cum artifacts. In Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, you have to resurrect Dracula by going around the world and collecting his various body parts before putting them together. That's kind of what we're doing here today. We're just gonna take a look at various cum artifacts from around the internet. We're making Dracula out of cum. The song Zero by the Smashing Pumpkins begins with the line, "My reflection, dirty mirror, there's no connection to myself." When the owner of the National Wrestling Alliance, Billy Corgan, wrote these lyrics, he probably didn't consider the possibility of staring at yourself in the mirror while jerking off. An act which, if anything, has an uncomfortable level of connection to yourself. Enter a Redditor named White Licorice. White Licorice was a rapper who befriended another rapper in his local scene. Eventually, they would become roommates during college. It was a comfortable enough setup, although, not perfect. He's white. His dad is from Haiti, though. Maybe he's like an eighth black or something? Not sure. We tried to get him to stop saying the N-word, but he refuses. Relatively early in their arrangement, White Licorice would notice a stink in their home, leading him to find out that his roommate had been coming in a box. Which he immediately told him, you gotta cut that shit out. Now I know what you're thinking, and a Redditor named Semen Slayer had the same thought. Is it the Cumbox guy? I didn't know about the Cumbox guy. Based on the details of these stories, I think it was a different guy, and you'll find in this video that it's pretty common for people to enjoy the same artifacts. In any case, White Licorice thinks he's nipped the Cumbox problem in the bud, and the roommate comes to White Licorice and his other roommate with a big announcement. He eventually just told us one night, like, yo, I have this mirror in my room that I've been coming on all year. I think it was a big joke to him. And here's the mirror. Reminds me of when Kevin Malone spilled his chili everywhere. How'd he manage to hide this the whole time? You see, the mirror was placed on the back of the door to his room, which opened to the inside. So whenever they walked into his room, the mirror would be hidden just out of view. They're not quite sure why he did it. Licorice thought maybe it was just a joke, although as another user named Fiji Artesia noted. So for an entire year, he's jizzing on this mirror and thinking, man, this joke is gonna be hilarious when my roommates find it in a year. White Licorice would then use all the attention his post was getting to promote his song, I Hate Some Cops. So I got a couple of desk artifacts over here, one of which is kinda lost media. But let's start with the first. In a thread on Ask Reddit, bosses of Reddit, what's the craziest thing an employee has done while at work? Did you fire him/her? Shit just got shitty ways in. An employee constantly masturbated in his cubicle under his desk. The reason I say constantly is because when he was actually caught by a female employee and reported, another boss went to look at his cubicle. What he found was absolutely appalling. So the boss thinks, you know what? I'm gonna go look for the cum. Normally you'd probably just assume this guy who's jerking off at work would clean up after himself, if anything, to just not get caught. But I guess the boss had a hunch, so he's wearing his nice business suit, gets down on his knees to look for cum, and sure enough, he confirms his suspicions. Under his desk, there was cum everywhere. The guy always shot his gentleman's relish right under his desk so that it would hit the wood. He worked there for over 10 years. The dick spit was so thick after all the countless times of ejaculation, parts of it were black and growing mold. He covered the smell by always having some type of air freshener going. See, that's what all these other guys should have thought of. We should have taken the hint sooner. In the end, he was fired. Cum desk number 2. Neroxella was splitting a dorm room in college. He posts to r/WTF. Found this in my roommate's drawer. Big, smiley, flat face with big eyes. He's not quite sure what it's supposed to be, but the consensus is, yeah, that's cum. And based on what I've seen in the course of doing this channel, I'm like 99% sure that's cum. But Neroxella isn't quite sure and adds a few details. I still have no idea what this is, but I will make a follow-up post. I really hope it isn't what you all think it is. I wasn't really in the room with him that much since I spent most of my time at my girlfriend's dorm, but all I know is that whenever I was there, he was playing LOL, yelling in Russian, and eating Chinese. The update soon comes with more images of the whole room and the surrounding area. Curiously, he notes that there was no smell, which clearly is a point against it being cum. but maybe the guy just had a very clean diet or something. Although one person suggests it could have been chewing tobacco spit. Perhaps the most haunting suggestion was by Null Painter. Dude, I think I just figure out what's going on here, and I don't think OP is going to like it. Maybe someone else already has said this, but given the position of the stain, the spread and direction of the layers, and that he'd have a hell of a hard time sitting down and getting it to arc like that. Your roommate was standing up whenever he unloaded inside his desk, downward and inward into the drawer. His desk faces your bed. He may have been watching you sleep while he did this, apparently every night since he first moved in. Still, Narixel was not convinced of what this actually was. And by now, the roommate was long gone. What do you guys think it is? I think it's Cum. And now, Cumdesk the Third. Redditor Crippled Kraut worked with an oil and gas engineer that in his opinion was getting paid way too much for what they were actually doing, which as he recalls was mostly just hanging out in his office with his wife. He noted that his office, which was a bit far away from everyone else's, did have a bit of a smell to it, but he chalked that up to the fact that he ate a lot of Indian food. Then one day, this guy gets fired. They're cleaning out his office, and this is what they find underneath his desk. A bunch of high-impact splatters there. It all looks kinda recent though, so either this was a new habit, or maybe this guy actually cleaned up after himself occasionally. And finally, Cumdesk the Fourth, the Lost Cumdesk. All that seems to remain of this one is a single post on r/Reddit's Museum of Filth. Guy comes on his work desk for years, which goes to a post on a now banned subreddit, Jackoff Confessions. Unfortunately, this thread isn't archived, so we can only piece things together from people's reactions in the Museum of Filth thread, with a few saying that this picture almost made them throw up. We also have a piece of how the original poster explained the smell, reposted by Google Earthlings. Believe it or not, I wasn't the only eccentric person in the office. It very well may have smelled had it not been for three factors. My boss, the owner, had no sense of smell as he lost it all after suffering a concussion. He also had a nasty habit of smoking in the office and relentlessly burning sage, and the office already smelled of mold because of a water leak from the floor above our office. The leak nearly killed the server I built, not to mention the dodgy electrical work. He also mentioned something to the effect of he jerked off at work because he didn't have a dad or something like that, but that's about all we know about the fourth desk. Rav Mysterin visits r/Make Me Suffer with a special treat. I have a feeling you guys are going to like this. This is the difference between a normal gray sock and my 5-year-old cum plus tonsil stone sock. And you can see the comparison here with the cum sock having a classic burnt pizza crust look. And I realize some of you may be unaware of what a tonsil stone is. Tonsil stones, more scientifically called tonsilloliths, are these lumps of waste that form in your tonsils when you're sick. Some people get them all the time, some people never get them, but they always smell absolutely vile. So just imagine all the other artifacts in this video and magnify the smell by 100. As he described it, it smelled like a corpse's asshole, and he has to wash his hands several times after using it. Unless, he just uses gloves, which he did some of the time. He never really explained why he was shooting tonsil stones into the same sock he nutted into, but he did explain the general concept. My idea was that if I ever got a girlfriend, I've realized at this point that I probably won't, I will give this thing a Viking funeral with the boat and everything. It's basically my virginity horcrux. Shirts are a pretty obvious one. I mean, they're always just kind of around. And sure enough, there's plenty of these. For example, you have this one user on 4chan who identified himself as Kara. He'd been using a pair of shirts as cum rags for the past 3 years until one day, he accidentally left them out and his mother found them. She demanded that he throw them out, which he did immediately. But then at night, he took them back in to take some pictures. I had to wait until nightfall to take them out of the trash can since the neighbors don't like it when I take stuff out of the trash can. Apparently it's a thing he does with some regularity. Even though he was sad to see them go, he said it was also kind of a good thing since he had been thinking about trying a nofap. I guess he felt like he needed the shirts to get started. There's a few other of these that turn up from time to time, like this one attributed to someone named Hale KC that kinda looks like it's forming scabs. But probably the greatest cum shirt story comes from Finland. In February of 2015, a user of the Finnish image board Ilauta posted a shirt that he had allegedly used for 8 to 9 years for what he had estimated to be about 4,500 loads. Other posters had ideas for what he could do with it, like cutting a piece of the shirt off and making tea out of it. Ultimately, what he would wind up doing is scraping some of it off and snorting a line of it. I feel like I could convince esoteric health Twitter that scraping off your old dried cum, making it a powder and snorting it could give you some kind of alpha male powers. Of course, the Finnish poster didn't describe any of that effect. He just said it burned his nose and tasted like snot. And those are today's cum artifacts.
If you grew up listening to rock or metal, chances are you had people say things to you like, you listen to that devil music? Rah, 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 Metallica, kill your mother, kill your father. My favorite Metallica song, by the way. One time, I had a kid ask me if Slipknot was a t-shirt brand, which was actually pretty funny, to be honest. And something else that I heard a lot about was the idea that Marilyn Manson wanted to kill himself on stage, or he made his fans kill animals at his shows, or he had his bottom ribs removed so he could blow himself. So for today's video, let's take a look at Marilyn Manson performing autofellatio. Strange rumors about Marilyn Manson were kind of like the Chuck Norris facts of the 90s. He was basically the biggest mainstream incarnation of what it meant to be a weird, creepy dude, or was at least perceived that way. So people, especially the ones who weren't fans of his music, would just ascribe the weirdest shit to him. I mean, if people thought Metallica, who are as safe as it gets, were making songs about killing your parents, what would these same people think that a guy like Marilyn Manson was possibly up to? It had to be some real wild, unthinkable shit. And all these rumors would travel from school to school around the world like that weird S thing. For example, there was the rumor that on Halloween of 1996, he was going to kill himself at the climax of his own show. Obviously, that didn't happen, although he came damn close a couple of years ago in New York. That was when one of his stage props fell and crushed him in the middle of his set. And you know, because of those rumors all those years ago, people even thought that was staged, but it was real. He got hurt real bad, but thankfully he survived. And as for the Halloween show, although there was a bomb threat, nothing wound up happening from it. The show came and went, and then the rumor evolved into people saying Marilyn Manson's greatest dream is to kill himself at one of his shows, but you don't know what show it's gonna be. Similarly, there was another rumor, one that kind of takes after rumors about Ozzy Osbourne and Alice Cooper, that either he killed animals on stage at his shows, or he wouldn't start his show unless fans killed the animals themselves. This one circulated a lot through chain emails. Let me read one of them for you. Dear whomever may read this, today is March 30th, 1999, and today I heard about something that has to stop. You all know of the sick person named Marilyn Manson. I know someone who went to one of his concerts. He is abusing animals. He threw several puppies into the crowd before his show. Then he told the crowd that he would not start the show until the pups were killed. So, in conclusion, several puppies are killed at each Marilyn Manson concert. This is a sick thing that has to stop now, and we are the only ones who can stop it. This guy is a sick person. I am sending this to everyone on my buddy list, and if you could please send this to at least 10 people, we could make a difference. If people realize what this sick man is doing, then less people will go to his concerts, and then when nobody comes, he can't kill any more puppies. So please, by sending this, you are saving the lives of a couple puppies. And let me just tell you that if you don't send this, you are a self-centered loser. This one to me almost reads a little bit like satire, but I guess it was convincing enough that it was believable for some people. It's obvious that if this were going down, it would be impossible to hide. In this time period, Marilyn Manson is playing 20,000 cap venues. Surely, at least one of those 20,000 people, including venue staff who don't necessarily give a shit about Marilyn Manson, would have a problem like that and say something. But I can't even act that smug about these ones because the next one got me. Like, I literally thought this rumor was true until like maybe a year or two ago. I'm talking about the rumor that Marilyn Manson got real breast implants for the cover of Mechanical Animals. Which, unpopular, well, I don't even know if this is an unpopular opinion or not, I think it might be. But that's actually my favorite Manson album. I mean, I think Antichrist Superstar has higher highs, Irresponsible Hate Anthem, Beautiful People, Tourniquet, those songs are untouchable. But beginning to end, I feel like Mechanical Animals is the only one that I'll really sit down with like that. But anyway, the cover of Mechanical Animals, he's got these tits. And the music video for Dope Show comes out and he's still got those tits. A few months pass and he puts out a music video for I Don't Like the Drugs But the Drugs Like Me, and now his tits are gone. So what happened to his tits? I'll let this old Angel Fire website, The Auditorium, explain. 1. Did Marilyn Manson really have breast implants? Only temporarily. Reconstructive plastic surgery. for the photo shoot for the new album Mechanical Animals. In other words, he only had breasts for a certain amount of time. They were removed after the photo shoot. Marilyn wanted to have that androgynous look, sort of sexless and sexy at the same time. Look at the album cover, you'll see what I mean. In parts of the Dope Show video, he wears a bodysuit. So this is a page that's all about clearing up misconceptions about Marilyn Manson, and the top answer is confirming the fake rumor that he had real breasts. And I guess part of why I believe this one was that, compared to a lot of the other stuff he was accused of, this one was a lot more realistic. I mean, this is the thing people actually do. It wasn't even that many years later when a guy who actually did get breast implants because he lost a bet went on The Man Show back when Jimmy Kimmel didn't suck. But unfortunately, yeah, this one was fake. He wasn't wearing the bodysuit just in the music video, but always. The way that website explained it reminds me of how I used to think 2 of the Ninja Turtles were real when I was a little kid, because TV Guide only listed actors for 2 of them. Then there was the rumor that Marilyn Manson was Paul from the Wonder Years all grown up. Wouldn't that be something? The archetypal nerdy kid grows up and becomes the world's craziest shock rock icon. Alright, I kinda believe this one for a little bit too. So the Wonder Years ends in 1993. Josh Saviano, the actor for Paul, is never seen on TV again. Marilyn Manson's major label debut was in 1994. And they did kind of have similar facial features. Although now that I look, they actually don't really look that similar. I specifically remember hearing this one in the locker room in junior high, and back then I didn't have a phone to look it up. So I guess I kind of just took my fuzzy memory of what Paul looked like, and was kind of like, I guess they kind of do look similar. The thing is, although Marilyn Manson's major label debut was in 1994, his band was actually put together in 1989. This was during the run of the Wonder Years. Here's a picture of what they look like. So this would have been the same guy. In fact, what actually wound up happening with Josh Saviano was he quit the TV industry to become a lawyer, and in 2013 he actually spoke to Yahoo about this rumor. I actually think it was one of the very first internet rumors, because it was 1994. The internet was just sort of becoming mainstream, particularly on college campuses. It was just perfect timing and the perfect storm. He said that at some point, he was actually planning to run up on stage at a Manson show and put a rest to the rumor once and for all. But now he's glad that he didn't do that because he's come to love the fact that some people still do think he's really Marilyn Manson. Of course, the biggest Marilyn Manson rumor of all is that he got his bottom 2 ribs removed to suck his own dick. And there's a lot of things to consider here. First of all, if you could suck your own dick, would it even be that great? Great enough to have a major surgical procedure? People put sucking their own dick on this pedestal, like it's this amazing thing to aspire to, but I'm not convinced. Cause in their heads, like, they're just like barely reaching it and then that's it, you're in. You just touch the tip like E.T. I mean the finger thing, there's no sucking your own dick scene in E.T. You've gotta be able to get a sizable portion in there. Like you have that Saturday Night Live sketch where Will Ferrell's taking yoga to learn how to suck his own dick and then he achieves it. But then you nut and what happens? Well, oh my god, you just like, you don't know what to fucking do with it, so it just flops out. It's awkward. And this theory is backed up by a post that I found on Reddit. Scruffy Nerd finishes in his own mouth, spills it like a goofball. Found on r/autofellatio, a subreddit dedicated to sucking your own dick. Obviously, I can't show you the posts from there, but here's a sampling. Is self-sucking gay? Keep injuring myself. Can't bend my back. So I managed to make contact, but I have a minor concern. 2 property managers walked in on me trying to suck my own dick. I still shudder from the thought of it to this day. Repost. A quick browse of r/autofellatio will show you that this is in fact possible without rib removal. In fact, I'm not even so sure that rib removal would even help. Because, it's not really your ribs that are in your way, it's more of like an overall mobility thing. Like, basically, the Will Ferrell character is right, and yoga is the path to blowing yourself. That's not to say that people don't ever get elective rib removal surgery, but it tends to be more tied towards waist training. Women with tiny waists from waist training have been accused of getting ribs removed as far back as the 1800s, although there's no evidence of that having ever happened back then. And considering the state of medicine at that time, it would have been exceptionally dangerous to get something like that done. More so than it is now. The accusations probably mostly just came from the fact that when you look at like a really small, trained waist, it just looks unnatural, like some kind of uncanny valley thing. But that being said, there are some known cases where this has actually happened. one of them being Amanda Lepore, who traveled to Mexico not to get her ribs removed, but to have them broken and pushed in further to create a smaller waistline. Another being Pixie Fox, who had 6 ribs removed in Indiana. Her surgeon, Dr. Barry Epley, spoke to Fox and mentioned that this is a procedure that just does happen from time to time. Rib removal is almost an urban myth dating back to the 1970s when Cher was rumored to have had it. But it is done, he said. I just did a rib removal surgery on another woman after Pixie who removed even more ribs than her. It just seems extreme because it is the only plastic surgery other than liposuction that removes normal body parts. So it seems extreme. As for Marilyn Manson, he commented on this rumor somewhat recently. In an article for Q magazine, he answered a few fan-submitted questions. This one came from a reader named Keith Rathbone. For years, it was rumored that you'd had a rib removed to achieve self-fellatio. Obviously that's nonsense, but have you ever tried to suck your own cock? To which Manson responded, wow, does Keith get money if I answer this? No comment, Keith, you cunt. Nearly a decade before that, he addressed it in the book The Long Road Out of Hell, the autobiography he co-wrote with Neil Strauss. If I really got my ribs removed, I would have been busy sucking my own dick on the Wonder Years instead of chasing Winnie Cooper. The year before that book, however, in another interview also of Neil Strauss, but this time for Rolling Stone magazine, he addressed the rumors as a whole. For a solid year, there was a rumor that I was going to commit suicide on Halloween, says Manson. He is sitting in a hot tub. Yes, a hot tub, in his hometown of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I started to think, maybe I have to kill myself. Maybe that's what I was supposed to do. Then, when we were performing on Halloween, there was a bomb threat. I guess someone thought they would take care of the situation for me. It was one of those moments where chaos had control. The article goes on to dismiss a lot of the rumors and talks about how a lot of them come from a place of Marilyn Manson being misunderstood, not just by people who disliked his music, but also sometimes by his fans themselves. That being said, there's no way he's never tried to suck his own dick, at least once.
December 13th, 1984. Perhaps one of the most cruel videos to ever hit the internet. A tall, skinny man stands before a karate class, claiming that he was trained by Jesus Christ himself. The owner of the dojo pretends that the man, who is clearly mentally unwell, has been brought to the class to teach Jesus' spiritual martial arts techniques. And then, under the teacher's watch, a student beats the man to near death, leaving him making sounds reminiscent of Chechclear and dragged out behind the karate studio. It's a video that the internet has investigated many times throughout the years, but to this day, it remains unsolved. So for this episode of Tales from the Internet, let's take a look at what happened to Kung Fu Guy. The story begins with a video on YouTube simply titled, Jesus Taught Me. It was posted on April 1st of 2009, but it went unnoticed for months. When someone finally did stumble upon it though, they were horrified. It appeared to show a martial arts student assaulting a mentally unwell homeless man. The footage begins with the dojo sensei egging them on. He tells the victim to repeat what was said off camera. We'll refer to the victim from this point as Kung Fu Guy. Kung Fu Guy claims that Jesus taught him karate, and he offers to demonstrate. The class snickers in the background as the leader instructs his top student to step forward. But just as Kung Fu Guy says he doesn't want to fight, the black belt kicks him in the groin. This escalates as the two trade blows before clinching on the floor. With the man beneath him, the student starts mercilessly punching him. He then drags the victim by his hair and hits him in the face. And it only gets worse from there. Kung Fu Guy is eventually pushed back to the ground as the assailant kicks his head over and over. He desperately tries to get up only to get hit with a knee. This causes him to keel over seemingly unconscious. And still the black belt doesn't relent. Rather than show any mercy, he repeatedly stomps on the man's head. And by the end, the victim is rasping in heavy, labored breaths as his head drips with blood. Off screen, the instructor can be heard saying, "Drag him out the back door." The scene then cuts to a later point in time. The instructor shows a trail of blood on the floor. He then has the camera zoom in to show more stains on the back door. Needless to say, it was a really disturbing piece of footage, and it's unclear whether or not the victim survived. Regardless, this seemed like evidence in a really serious crime. And because of this, in early August, a user shared the clip to the martial arts forum Bullshido. They hoped someone would take interest in conducting a further examination. And the thread very quickly flooded with people who were completely disgusted by this video and wanted justice for this man. And that begins with trying to figure out where this video came from. The tape was old, with a date stated in the video, December 13th, 1984. But if this video had been made over 2 decades ago, why did it only just surface now? The answer became more clear after investigating the channel itself. There were 24 other uploads, which were all archives from the same dojo. This included a lecture that gave insight into the school's values.
The person wises off to you.
And
If they come through that door, it's open season.
the instructor also threatened to stomp out students if they were gay.
If a person touches you, he's either or he's stupid. So if you're come in today, if I find out later, I'll stomp your ass.
And these videos contained enough to identify the dojo and its sensei. It had been located at a strip mall in Dumfries, Virginia, and run by a man named Bobby Joe Blythe. Given that the uploader's username was Bobby Joe Blythe 007, wasn't hard to figure out the rest. The name's Blythe. Bobby Joe Blythe. People don't typically upload potentially incriminating videos of themselves, so he must have viewed the assault on that man as an accomplishment. But as more and more negative comments flooded in, Bobby became defensive. In one of these comments, a user states, "That dude snapped. Looks to me like somebody's lost control." Bobby replied that if this had lasted any longer, he'd have dropped both of them. I was very disappointed with my guy, and he paid for a week after that. That video will be coming up soon. Eventually, he updated the description to include a more detailed recounting of the fight. He claimed that Kung Fu Guy had actually been a public nuisance hours prior. This guy was in Pizza Hut eating off the plates of others, so the manager ran him out with a pistol. Later on, officers were called to remove him from the pharmacy after reaching into customers' purses. Then he visited a store and told management he planned on teaching in my dojo and that Jesus taught him. Between the two cuts, they'd apparently thrown the man in the dumpster, and he was only pulled out by police. The last Bobby had heard, Kung Fu Guy was being held involuntarily at a mental institution in Salem. This elaboration did little to turn the tides, because this was simply his justification for the act. A lot of people also suspected that Sensei was lying about the victim being alive. His injuries just seemed too severe. Bobby offhandedly mentioned having a bodyguard company at the time. This company was later identified as Action Investigative Services. This led them to his personal details, which they used to track down his current whereabouts. The 63-year-old had retired as a teacher, and he was now at this point living in Fresno, California. And they used this information to uncover his Facebook page along with other social media profiles. As you've probably guessed, these accounts very quickly were bombarded with hate comments from the mob. And thus, Bobby deleted his entire online presence, including the original YouTube upload. But the internet, of course, never forgets, and dozens of copies were uploaded on YouTube. And this campaign wouldn't stop as word of this deranged assault would spread further. Before long, it was in front of the entire web, from LiveLeak to Something Awful. There's even a website made documenting their discoveries in this investigation, Justice for Kung Fu Guy. Though they quickly found Bobby, he wasn't their main target. The actual assailant in the video up to this point remained unidentified. And through their investigation, they would conclude that this was a student named William Dennis. This individual moved to Florida and was facing charges at the time for domestic abuse. That being said, it is worth clarifying that this link is less definitive in comparison to Bobby Joe Blythe. Because, you know, Bobby admitted to the whole thing while William has not. By late August, the tape was so widespread that news outlets picked up the story. KMPH would air a segment that revealed that it caught the attention of local, state, federal, and military investigators. They also included an interview with Fresno Police Chief Carlo Mestas, who said his department was assisting in this case.
Investigators say although Blythe is not seen personally hurting the victim, he could still face legal troubles.
No, he didn't do anything about it, and he had control of it. Since that was one of his students, you can almost say that he was the one that directed it.
Mestas went so far as to said that the victim's injuries looked so severe that he believed he was probably dead.
Having seen him get stomped, his head stomped as many times as he did, I would be surprised that he survived it or did not at least have major brain damage. It's a cold case. You know, there's going to be a lot of work that's going to be done by other agencies. They're going to probably have to look for missing persons cases, 25 years back. Who knows, hopefully we can get to the bottom of this.
But this was contradicted a week later when the Washington Post reported on the ordeal. A police chief in California went on local television vowing investigations into what he called a cold case. Except the case isn't cold, and the man wasn't killed. We appreciate that the video was sent to us and that people saw it and were concerned. Captain Ronald Mackey of the Dumfries Police Department said that the video appears to be real, but that police have confirmed the victim was not killed, since he was interviewed after the fact. So I spoke to the victim and he was okay. That should be the end of it, right? Not exactly. The article goes on to state that officials were still unable to determine the victim's name. That's because their investigation into the incident was minimal. The Washington Post also interviewed Chuck Feldbush, a retired policeman who once patrolled Dumfries. He recalled Kung Fu Guy as a vagrant who lived in the woods. The man often committed crimes with the intent of getting caught to guarantee a roof and meals. Days after the incident, Feldbush noticed him limping and severely beaten. But the victim wasn't cooperative and didn't want to press charges. Because of this, the felony assault was overlooked. Although the police had heard of this tape's existence, they didn't see it until the public did. If they had, he said that they'd have pursued it as far as they could. But it was too late now. No one remembered the man's name. Following this, local police continued their efforts to identify him. They examined informations on unidentified bodies from the time, but nothing turned up. But while the search proved unsuccessful, it inadvertently unearthed a completely new victim. This man claimed that members of the same dojo invited him to display his fighting style back in the 80s. The next thing he remembers, he's waking up in the back of an ambulance. This reveals that what had happened to Kung Fu Guy wasn't an isolated incident. For all we know, they could have been attacking people regularly and filming all of it. And I guess, as much was said in the lectures.
If they come through that door, it's open season.
Unfortunately, this story never reached a conclusion, and these crimes slowly faded from the public's consciousness. Nobody has ever faced any consequences for what happened here, and the victim was never identified. And because of this, his fate is unclear. Although the police officer recalled seeing him severely beaten after the assault had happened, he could have easily died weeks or even months later due to complications from these injuries. Over the years, there's been quite a few attempts to get interest back into this case, but truthfully, there just seems to be no new leads. It happened so long ago, and he was homeless, so people didn't really account for him. With that being said, there's still one aspect that I've neglected to mention. It was pointed out pretty early on in the original investigation that many of the details Bobby shared indicated a connection with the local police. For example, mentioning how he was kicked out of Pizza Hut or reaching into women's purses. These were anecdotes that Feldbush relayed later as he self-admittedly knew both Blythe and the victim. This led many to posit that perhaps this assault was overlooked intentionally. This argument was outlined on Reddit by Sailormouth. Though I'm not one to believe in very many police conspiracies, I have to wonder, if this is a small town, how many of their police force trained at this particular dojo? In response, a user replied with evidence that Bobby had a military background. He seemed to have served in the Marine Corps and participated in the Vietnam War. They concluded, it seems like his main customers were not housewives looking for an exercise class, but bodyguards, cops, and others with a professional need for martial arts training. But at that point, it's all people just taking guesses about things. The connections might actually go deeper than that. In a post from the original Bullshido thread, a user found Bobby in an episode of the Today Show about female bodyguards. They state one of the women was the county sheriff's wife. It was explained that she was a student at his dojo. This is reaffirmed by other posters, though this video itself is no longer available. To be clear, this too is all just speculation. It's not close to definitive evidence. And honestly, whether or not the police had ties to Bobby Joe Blythe, they failed to do their job regardless. It's wild to think about how many cases there are like these. What people are allowed to get away with so long as it's targeted at the right people. And it's not like Bobby had hidden it either. Remember, he uploaded this himself. If he had been a bit more self-aware, this crime would have went completely unnoticed. And it makes you wonder how many incidents there are like this out there, just sitting on a VHS tape in someone's closet, never to see the light of day again. Maybe one day there'll be some kind of breakthrough that brings closure to this story, but if there was to be any justice, it should have happened nearly 30 years ago.
Gambling has a way of just making everything a little bit more interesting. I'm not only talking about the odd game of poker or blackjack either. Like personally, I'm not the biggest sports fan, but if I got a little something riding on the game, maybe I can be. Same goes for politics. I mean, who hasn't made a buck or two betting on the elections? And when it's stuff you actually do like already, forget about it. Like say, the TV show Breaking Bad. And you know what? Money gets boring sometimes. What if, instead of gambling with money, you gambled with piss? For today's episode of Tales from the Internet, let's take a look at the guy who drank his own pee because of Breaking Bad. Now, before I get into the actual story, there's a bit of background I have to explain from Breaking Bad. So if you haven't seen the show yet, the spoilers ahead. The 4th season focuses on the power struggle between Walt and Gus Fring. It becomes a dangerous game as Walt fights to survive. Jesse is given the task of poisoning their boss using a ricin-filled cigarette, yet he hesitates when Gus shows favoritism towards him. This causes a rift between the previously loyal partners. And with his closest ally gone, everything seems hopeless. But then, Jesse's girlfriend calls him in a panic. Her son, Brock, has been hospitalized with a serious illness. Jesse realizes that the ricin cigarette is missing. He suspects that Walt is behind this and confronts him at gunpoint. However, Walt convinces Jesse of his innocence. He then claims that Gus is the one who framed him for this exact situation. They then conspire together to eliminate the ruthless kingpin. This is where viewers were left to hang when the episode End Times aired on October 2nd, 2011. And with a single episode left in the season, there was fervent debate over what would happen next. The most heated debate centered around whether or not Walt actually did poison Brock. That was the case with the thread posted to the Breaking Bad subreddit. After rewatching episode 12, I am convinced that Walt poisoned Brock. The OP points out several scenes, including one in which Walt stares at a poisonous plant. While most just discussed the actual theory, a post from a user named Paging Craig stood out. If Walt did it, I'll drink my own piss. Immediately, people took him up on this offer. Can I hold you to this? This will be brought up again if you don't. Now, it wouldn't be right without fair stakes. Thankfully, a user named Frank Reynolds stepped up to the bat. This meant that either way, someone was drinking piss. Shortly after, a thread was created to discuss the competition, and they attempted to ensure that the outcome couldn't be faked. There will be urine consumption. I vote that whoever loses must post a video. In said video, you will pee into a cup of sorts and drink it all in one take. No cuts in between. I love the internet. The problem is, you can use apple juice or something similar and we would be none the wiser. What if he uses a fake dick? Test the pH levels. It's unclear if Craig knew his declaration would be taken so seriously, but the pressure mounted as the moderators backed the bet. The subreddit is going to require a video of your comeuppance, should you be proven wrong. Another commented, I will go on record saying that the r/Breaking Bad mods fully support this ridiculous contest. This affirmed that if they didn't follow through, they would be banned. Of course, that didn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. Realistically, if one of them backed out and got banned, they could just make a new account to post on, and in any case, nobody would really remember in a week or so. Yet the two parties were insistent on their wager. Frank replied that he was a man of his word. However, he stipulated that his man bits wouldn't be seen as he had learned that lesson already. Which I feel like that's kind of a lesson you can only learn once, because past that everyone's just like, dick is old news, buddy, nobody cares anymore. In any case, this sparked some controversy as people felt that they couldn't be sure unless his genitals were in the frame. How will people be sure it's actual pee and not one of those urinator systems with the clamp and the tube hidden? In response, a user questioned if they'd feel differently if one of them were a girl. They then suggested they turn their back just enough to see both the stream and the cup, and these questions led them to follow Craig into other subreddits. He was asked about specifics in a completely different community. Hey, are you going to actually piss into a cup then drink it on video? So we're going to see the production of urine and the drinking part? You don't think you're going to vomit after doing it, or that the video will go viral? He replied bluntly, I don't know. It depends on what happens on Sunday. Later he clarified that he'd pee into the glass on camera. Strangely enough, all this attention led to a third person to join in. I am willing to drink my own piss if Walt didn't do it as well. Screen cap away, gentlemen. It won't be an epic switch like Hale did either. He pointed to his history of following up on bets on Reddit. When the Pats scored 34 against the Colts, he posted a picture of himself in drag. Honestly, considering that we already had two sides of the bet accounted for, I feel like this guy just wanted an excuse to drink his pee in public. But now with 3 different individuals offering to ingest urine for the cause, the stakes were rising. There was a concern they could get out of it using semantics. The loser is going to pull a semantic out, like, Walt didn't actually do it, Saul did it on Walt's order, or he poisoned him with ricin, not the plant claimed in the post.
Frank disputed this by broadening the terms right then and there, but most just continued to debate Walt's innocence. It's honestly kind of interesting to look back on what they thought at the time. I honestly do not think Walt did it. It's one of the more ridiculous fad conspiracy theories. The community was restless, waiting anxiously for answers, and they remained on edge until October 9th, when the finale finally aired. Needless to say, it didn't disappoint. Face Off remains the third highest rated episode of the series to this day. The only two above it wouldn't air until a year later. It delivered an intense season-long build-up while executing an iconic villain in perhaps one of the most memorable deaths we'd ever seen on TV before. And in spite of how reprehensible Walt had become, it made you root for him. Yet, as viewers celebrated his victory, the show hit them with a curveball. The final shot cuts to his backyard as the camera slowly pans left. This reveals a lily of the valley plant, which Walt used to poison Brock. Upon this revelation, the subreddit was quickly filled with posts about the bet. They were eager to see if Craig would deliver. The moderator even sent him a message to be read after the finale. "Hello, Paging Craig. This is awkward. We need you to up your fluid intake and get your video camera ready. In order to keep your word, you'll be drinking your piss for the enjoyment of strangers on the internet." Bet you didn't see that coming when you thought about what you'd be doing with your life a few years back. Please message the mods and let us know whether you'll be planning on keeping up your side of the bet. We'll move on from there. Hey, at least you'll be internet famous, right? This flood upset a lot of people because it was tied to such an important plot point. The outcome was an immediate spoiler for anyone familiar with the bet. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was trying to avoid spoilers for a TV show that I hadn't watched yet, I would simply not browse the subreddit until I saw it. In any case, I'm willing to bet that whoever was mad about it got over it pretty quickly, given that they weren't expected to chase it with urine. An hour later, Craig returned with an update. He decided to edit his original comment instead of making a new post in order to minimize spoilers. And he would, in fact, deliver. Edit. So as not to spoil anything for anyone on the subreddit, did I have to drink my own piss? Well, since I can't get spoilers to work, I assume people who come here know the outcome. Yes, I did. And Walt is a bastard, lol. Time to eat crow and drink my own piss. Tasted worse than I expected. He then included a link to the video. It's clear that, regardless of losing, he was distraught by the news. The account was named Walt Harms Kids, and the video, Walt is evil, better drink my own piss. It's only a minute long, but I'm not sure if YouTube will let me play the entire thing. The footage begins with Craig showing off a cup. He places it in the middle of his bathtub to minimize spillage, then he starts to pee. It's pretty messy though, I can't tell if he has bad aim or did that on purpose. Maybe he decided he'd poured himself enough. As the stream tapers, Craig bends over and picks up the urine-filled glass. He reflects on his prediction, admitting that he was 100% wrong. Finally, after showing it to the camera one last time, he downs it all in one shot. The community erupted as truly no one knew that he'd actually do it. It was a mixture of both shock and praise that he actually kept his word. But most of all, they were just concerned with how yellow it was. You need to drink more water, son. His piss is yellower than Tuco's pre-Walt meth. Ugh. It got to the point that Craig had to explain himself. I drank like a quarter gallon all day to make it dark, so people wouldn't think I just put water in a glass somehow. I mean, props to him. He decided to make the act even nastier just to dispel any doubt. His original comment went on to collect over 1,600 upvotes, and the story eventually escapes the community, being shared on r/bestof. A lot of people seeing it claimed that they were too grossed out to even watch it, while one claimed that they did watch it and vomited. Inevitably, there were accusations of it being fake, despite his best efforts to prove otherwise. I'm not buying it, and I'm surprised people are so quick to believe this video. Nothing like a little yellow Kool-Aid in a squeeze bottle to make the trick complete. But easily, the most insane is this in-depth analysis of the flow of his urine. Of course it's fake. The way he pees is totally unrealistic. It's just full strength without starting weak and building up. Then when he's done, there's no finishing off squirts, which are always required. Who pisses in one single uniform squirt? Lastly, unless he hasn't drunk liquids in 3 days, that shit ain't piss. These weren't popular opinions, but I couldn't not throw in the piss CSI. Paging Craig remained active for the next 4 years, and sometime after, he deleted the account entirely. This could have been out of shame, although the actual video remains up to this day. While it's unclear what he's up to these days, his legacy in the community remains. In 2012, the subreddit held a charity event called Breaking Good.
It raised money for A Place Called Home to educate children in LA about gang violence and drug abuse. The organization was chosen by Luis Moncada, one of the Salamanca twins. To encourage donations, a moderator promised to film a sequel to Craig's video. For 9 more days, we are still accepting donations for the Breaking Good event. We are currently at $2,808.43, and if we can reach 3,000, I will pull up Paging Craig and film myself drinking my own piss. No joke. The campaign managed to exceed this amount in the final 2 days, and Edify was forced to follow through. Unfortunately, this video is no longer available and there doesn't seem to be archives, so it's impossible for me to independently verify this footage. But judging from reactions, it seems like he also wasn't drinking enough water. It's kind of crazy that there's not 1, but 2 documented cases of people drinking their own pee over Breaking Bad, and 4 people in total eager enough to step forward as volunteers. But it's almost admirable in a way. Not the act itself, but the fact that they'd actually commit to it. No one could have forced Craig if he refused. It's a real show of character that ultimately led to support for a good cause. And that's the story of the Breaking Bad fans who drank their own pee. r/squared circle, Reddit's wrestling subreddit, has a time-honored tradition of making wild bets over whether or not certain things will come to pass in wrestling. For example, SummerSlam 2016, Dean Ambrose versus Dolph Ziggler for the WWE World Championship. Were Dolph Ziggler to defeat Dean Ambrose and become the champion, one Redditor promised to put his legs up, spread his cheeks open, and butt chug an entire bottle of Tabasco sauce. Like that one Boss Rutan self-defense video.
We choke him out, and then once he's choked out, we can do games like pull the pants down and hide the spice bottle.
Dolph Ziggler, of course, in true Dolph Ziggler fashion, did not win, thus saving this man's insides from blowing up like the Death Star. The same can't be said for Kalani49.
My name's Kalani. I'm gonna die.
Who, after losing a bet that Roman Reigns would fight Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam 2016, was forced to eat 5 habanero peppers. And Kalani, unlike most Redditors, held up his end of the bargain. But perhaps the most infamous r/squared circle bet involves Fall Out Boy, WrestleMania, and a tattoo of 9/11. I'll explain more in this episode of Tales from the Internet. So on September 29th of 2014, Fall Out Boy releases the song Centuries. Obviously I can't play it for you or this video is gonna get claimed and taken down instantly. But you definitely know this song. It was completely inescapable for a period of time. You know the one, it's like, remember me for centuries, that one. Even though it didn't exactly top the charts, it was just all over the place because it was perfect for sports events and commercials and TV shows and all that sort of stuff. So a Redditor named Man on the Moon comes to a very logical conclusion, and on November 2nd of 2014 he makes this post. I am more than convinced that this will be the Royal Rumble 2015 or WrestleMania 31 theme song next year. That if it isn't, I will get a tattoo of whatever the top comment is. Always a great idea to ask the internet for tattoo ideas that you'll be forced to do. And we get a lot of great submissions. Like Thongman X, who suggested he recreates Rey Mysterio's midriff tattoo that says Mexican. Campeón del Mundo suggests a picture of Nasty Boy Brian Knobbs' asshole. Or how about the bane of just about every online WWE fan at this period in time, Grimmy616's suggestion of Cena Winslow. But far and away, the top voted submission was by Stormclaw11. A depiction of Rusev kicking down the Twin Towers with the caption, "Never forget 3/29/15, the date of WrestleMania 31. Even went through the trouble of photoshopping it into a vaguely tattoo art-like style. This, of course, is a clear allusion to perhaps the greatest image ever made since the advent of photo manipulation technology. That, of course, being Hulk Hogan doing 9/11. There's some high stakes right here. A tattoo of a wrestler kicking down the World Trade Center is a life changer no matter how you get it. If it's visible, you're never going to be employed again. If it's hidden under clothes, say goodbye to any semblance of a normal dating life. But what makes a bet like this interesting? So Man on the Moon is making a very, very specific call here. You got one specific song, Centuries by Fall Out Boy, to be used on one of 2 specific events. There's a lot of songs out there, so it seems like the odds are pretty bad of him winning this.
But then again, this is the exact type of song that WWE would use for the Royal Rumble or for WrestleMania. Not only just in terms of how it actually sounds, but because it makes references to going down in history. It's perfect for WrestleMania, which during the promotion of they usually make references to the history of the event. Of any popular song that was going around at this time, this is the song that checks off every single box that WWE might be looking for a song for these events. But here's the thing, this was such a WWE song that they had already used it back in the previous month, October, for the 15th anniversary episode of SmackDown. That's gotta hurt the odds. Although, as a user named HedgeSlurp pointed out, there is some precedence for WWE reusing songs. In particular, I'm Coming Home, a song that is permanently burned into your brain if you were watching around this period of time. Used for both tribute to the troops and WrestleMania 29. You've also got the Flo Rida songs Good Feeling and Wild Ones, which were both used for multiple pay-per-views. HedgeSlurp posited that actually, because the song had already been used, it might actually increase the odds of it being used for WrestleMania. Depending on the contracts WWE had with the record label, it's very possible that he was on the money. So Sunday, January 25th comes around. Royal Rumble 2015. Brock Lesnar versus John Cena versus Seth Rollins. They start promoting the event, and the official theme song, completely different direction from what Man on the Moon or probably anybody else expected. Gonna Be a Fight Tonight by Danko Jones. It's a punky sounding hard rock song that's more like something you would find on like Road Rash 3D or something like that than any WWE event. So it looks like you got one more chance, Man on the Moon, or you're screwed. Can't back out now either. You had a bunch of other people pay the consequences of their lost bets. Can't have people on the internet who you'll never meet who have no idea who you actually are, thinking you're a sissy, right? Then you gotta get that Rusev 911 tattoo. But the thing is, WrestleMania tends to not just have one theme song. It usually has at least two, sometimes more, and then you got all these other WrestleMania tangential events throughout the week, like Access and the Hall of Fame. So you get a few shots at it. And we get to that stretch from January to the end of March. The road to WrestleMania. Every week on Raw, you got guys pointing at the sign. Every new week, you got new promo videos with new songs being used. Each new song like a click on the barrel of a gun in a game of Russian roulette. And finally, the two official songs of WrestleMania 31 are revealed. Rise by David Guetta featuring Skylar Gret. And Money and the Power by Kid Ink. Looks like it's time to pay up. Or is it? Whether or not Man on the Moon actually lost the bet becomes a bit of a controversy. So as I said before, WrestleMania isn't just WrestleMania. There's a bunch of other events throughout the week. One of them being the Hall of Fame. That year's Hall of Fame class, we got inductees like Macho Man Randy Savage, Rikishi, Alundra Blaze, Larry Zbyszko, Tatsumi Fujinami, Kevin Nash, the Bushwhackers, Arnold Schwarzenegger, as well as the Warrior Award for Connor the Crusher, a young Daniel Bryan fan who died of cancer and had the Connor's Cure charity made in his name. All kinds of music plays throughout this event, during the ceremony and between the segments. One of those songs being Centuries by Fall Out Boy. Man on the Moon. This totally fucking counts. In Man on the Moon's view, he won the bet. This song was used for WrestleMania as he had predicted. Of course, he gets a bunch of pushback on that statement though. You said theme song of WrestleMania 31 or Royal Rumble, not played in the background of the Hall of Fame, frowny face. You gotta get it, brother. Honor your word. No, it doesn't. You're still going to have to get that tattoo. Nope. Dude, it counts. This is like Stone Cold being Jericho and Benoit, King of the Ring 2001. And this leads to debate over what is actually considered an official WrestleMania theme song. WrestleMania considers any song they use for Mania to be a theme. They never have just one. I don't think that's true at all. They usually say the official theme of WrestleMania about a song. So in my view, I think he lost the bet. Alright, so he didn't say official theme song, but he said the theme song. Of which, for these events, we have a selection of 3 songs that WWE considers to be the song. That being said, I did see one comment by Murdank that kind of shifted my perspective a little bit on the subject. Anybody claiming the Hall of Fame doesn't count is a fucking idiot. Can you imagine the relief this man felt when they played that song? He maintained that he was going to get the tattoo and squeaked by on a loophole. Man on the Moon wins this bet, and we should all admit that the point he was trying to make has been made. Case closed. So I get what he's saying. Ultimately, the statement that he was trying to make with this bet was, as I had said before, that this song, Centuries by Fall Out Boy, is the absolute perfect song crafted in the style of what WWE typically uses for these events, so much so that he could almost guarantee that it would come to pass. And since the Hall of Fame is a part of WrestleMania week, the spirit of the statement that he made with this bet was true. And realistically, nobody was ever going to get a tattoo of Rusev kicking down the World Trade Center. Although, as many pointed out, technically he could have gotten by with just a tattoo of the URL. So what do you think? Did he win the bet? Did he lose the bet?
I don't know!
But anyway, that's all for now. If you like this video, check out my video about Vince McMahon versus the Parents Television Council. And don't forget to check out my sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description.